We could take our seats. We'd like to get started.
These things are on. Can we turn them off?
Okay, seeing that everybody looks like they're ready, I'll go ahead and say good morning to you all and welcome to the Dental Board of California quarterly meeting. Today is Thursday, August 10th, and I want to ask all of us to please turn off our cell phones to silent and make sure they're off the table so we can avoid feedback noise. Those of you in the audience may notice board members accessing laptops during the meeting. They are using the laptops solely to access board meeting materials that are in electronic format. This is an official business meeting of the Dental Board of California, and the board welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is the board's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. If for some reason I forget to ask for public comment on an agenda item and you wish to speak on that item, please raise your hand and you will be recognized. Depending on the number of people who would like to testify on a particular item, a time limit may need to be imposed. We ask all speakers to please stay on topic, and if a time limit is determined to be necessary, please keep your comments to within that time limit. I would like to now call the meeting to order and ask that our secretary please call the roll.
Yes. Burton?
Here.
Chan?
Here.
Chappelle Ingram. Forsythe?
Here.
King?
Here.
Lai?
Here.
Lay? Here. Medina? Here. Morrow?
Here.
Stewart?
Here.
Witcher?
Here.
Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Thank you. And then I've been asked to open the meeting with my own comments and President's message. As always, the issues here before us today are related to the board's mission of public protection, something that we should always keep foremost before other considerations. I'd like to make a few comments about some of the agenda items that we'll be considering today. As we know, dentistry is often in the news, and healthcare is certainly featured prominently as part of our national agenda lately, and dentistry, of course, is part of healthcare. So, like it or not, we are relevant to those discussions. A topic that has recently been in the news that we've been dealing with is, of course, the opioid abuse epidemic. And on July 31st, the Presidential Commission on the Opioid Epidemic released its interim report on possible solutions to the challenging problem. And according to that report, 142 Americans die each day from opioid overdose, more deaths than from gun homicides and car accidents combined. So we definitely have a problem. The report called for the president to declare the opioid epidemic a national disaster, an action that would make disaster funds available to state and local agencies. The report didn't really have a lot of new information that we haven't heard before, but I think it was signaled that, this again remains as part of a national agenda. And some of the relevance to dentistry is that it points out that our practitioners have a responsibility to help address this problem. For instance, fewer than 20% of an estimated million prescribers have training in safe prescribing practices and addiction screening. Yet 1 out of 5 individuals who abuse opioids start with the non-medical use of prescription drugs. So it is my hope that by utilizing California's Cures program and improving prescribing practices among our licensees, that we can do more to help address the epidemic. Regarding my own activities, on June 30th, I had the opportunity, along with Dr. Morrow, Ms. Fisher, and staff, to meet with representatives of the University de la Salle de Bajío School of Dentistry. And we met with the Dean, Estrada Triana, and his assistant, Maria Vargas. And the purpose of this meeting was to update the board on their progress with CODA accreditation and to obtain information about future California Dental Board approval of their school. They informed us that they had passed the first step of the 2-step approval process for foreign schools that is offered by CODA, and that they anticipate their CODA site visit, their final site visit in November, with their final report from CODA due out sometime next year. I think this is an interesting development, and it shows perhaps the world of dentistry is becoming more international, with international accreditation by CODA being possible. Finally, I would like to call your attention to the report published by the Department of Health that was issued in April, Status of Oral Health in California. I think there was a copy of this, which you should have all received. And this is sort of a roadmap or a blueprint going forward. It's intended to serve as a foundation for establishing a new state oral health plan for California. And this summarizes the most recent data that describes the oral health status, disparities, risks, and protective factors and dental services available in California. So it's a really good starting point. And I think you can download it. You don't have to have a hard copy. It should be pretty widely available, and it shows that our oral health director and Department of Health is really kind of moving forward on the state front. So I'd like to thank you with that. And then next, I'd like to go ahead and move forward with the call for approval of the February 23rd and 24th meeting minutes. So has everybody had a chance to read the February 23rd and 24th meeting minutes? Okay, any additions or corrections?
I move adoption of the minutes as presented.
Is there some comment here from public comment?
Mary McKeon, California Dental Association. We had 3 corrections under Agenda Item 10 for the Oral Health Program Advisory Committee. First, it said that the funds for the California Children Dental Disease Prevention Program were received. And
Where are you?
On Agenda Item 10.
Could you move to the mic a little bit more closely there? Thanks.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Perfect. So it just said that the California Children Dental Disease Prevention Program funds were received. We didn't know that to be true. I just, unless you guys heard something else, but we didn't think that was true or reflected correctly in the minutes. And then the second one was the DTI access to care for children was not received, and we thought that that was also not true, and it was received, and was actually a little bit later in the minutes, a board member comment stated that the state received the $750 million. So we just wanted to have both of those reflected correctly. And then Gail Matthews' last name was spelled incorrectly.
Okay, so noted. Yes.
Before we get started, what's wrong with these mics? It's like a...
It's really hard to hear.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm about to eat it, so.
No, not you.
Fran,
Not you.
Fran, talk into your mic. I mean, we're getting a reverberation back this way, but how are you all in the audience hearing it? It's not very clear?
It sounds like an echo, and it's really not loud.
Is
But
it
it's
better
not-
if I
it's
just
not
have
you.
like this, or?
Well,
Maybe,
Yeah,
I
because
think we
of-
need the AV person to come and make some adjustments.
I'm going to ask board members to turn their mics off. If you've got a green light, go ahead and turn it off. We'll see if that has any, Mary, why don't you go?
Testing. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Does this work? No?
Lou, what are our options?
Well, Carlo had to leave, but he certainly knows the system backwards and forwards. As soon as we get his attention, he can correct whatever problems we have.
Okay. So unfortunately, I think we're going to have to continue to move forward. And if the board members can just keep their mics off, but please remember to turn it on, because I actually was watching the May minutes, the May meeting, and you forget, it doesn't pick up your voice on the webcast unless the mic is right in front of you. So these are really not very obtrusive mics, so try to get them as close as you can when you speak. And then we'll call the audio person in as soon as we can and try and correct it. Mary, thank you for those comments. We'll work with staff to either just delete those lines or to take your comments into consideration.
Okay, if there's no additional comment on this item,
I have a question. So I can't remember if we've read them, but we weren't here one of the days or both the days. Can we still vote, or should we recuse ourselves?
Hi, this is Michael Santiago, legal counsel for the board. Technically, under Robert's Rules of Orders, you can vote to approve the minutes even though you weren't present at that meeting or meetings, so long as you've reviewed the actual minutes. So it's really at your discretion.
Okay, I guess we're ready to vote. Would you call the roll, please?
Yes. Burton? Chan? Forsythe? King?
Yes.
Lai?
Yes.
Lay? McKenzie? Medina?
Yes.
Morrow? Stewart? Witcher?
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. President.
Thank you. Now, yes, sir.
So it looks like our audio person is here. People in the back, are you still here? Is my voice vibrating, or is it clear? Clear? Clear, okay. So we need to test this mic
Hello,
here.
hello, hello. Does it sound all right? Does it sound okay?
Like, recite the Declaration of Independence or something.
On this date and night, no. I'm just kidding. Hello? Is it
I
better
think
now?
we need more, we need you to actually have more, Zach. I mean, speak more.
Read something.
Read something.
My name is Zach Rasky, and I'm the budget analyst.
Still.
I've been in this position for approximately 8 months.
Oh,
State with a bachelor in international relations.
that's better. Isn't that better? Yeah, it's better. Board members, is that better?
Let's try it, yeah.
Okay. I think we're good.
But stick around.
With that, I'd like to call for approval of the May 11th and 12th, 2017 board meeting minutes. If everybody's read and reviewed and has no comment, could we have a motion? Burton and Forsythe? Mhm. Any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, Yvette, would you call the roll, please?
Burton? Yes. Chan? Yes. Forsythe? Yes. King?
Yes.
Lai?
Yes.
Lay? Medina?
Yes.
Morrow? Yes. Stewart? Yes. Witcher?
Yes.
Mr. President, motion passes.
Thank you. Our next item is selection of meeting dates for 2018, 2019. You have before you a nicely prepared spreadsheet with some suggested meeting dates. I know it's a little early. I'm pretty much open at this time, so I'd say if anybody has any conflicts. I know we had a couple of board members who did send in some potential conflicts, like Board Member McKenzie, but anybody have any? Let's just start off. February.
So Meredith McKenzie sent her availability, and she's okay on February 8th and 9th, but February 1st and 2nd, she says February 1st is okay, but she has a conflict on the 2nd. What we try to do is schedule the meetings for at least a quorum of people. Of course, we would like 100% participation, but we understand that sometimes that can't happen. And we do appreciate if board members can at least make half the meeting. So, did you want to start first with February 8th and 9th and see if anybody had conflicts with that?
Is everybody okay with 8th and 9th?
I'm okay with it.
Okay, 8th and 9th it is.
Okay.
May 2018. We have choice of two dates, 17th and 18th, or the 10th and 11th.
Oh, and I can't do the 17th.
And Meredith can't do the 10th or the 11th. So she is available the 17, 18.
May I ask, where would the May meeting be? Southern California, Northern? If it's in my backyard, I could do it.
Sarah?
Sarah Wallace, Assistant Executive Officer. It would depend on the availability of hotels. You know, in the past, we've had it in San Francisco typically in May. This last year, we changed things up and had it in Anaheim. So based on the availability of the hotel, it is possible that it could be in Southern California, but at this point, we don't know.
Okay. That's not me.
Yes, in the back, please. You have a public comment on this? Could,
CDA Anaheim is scheduled, I believe, for the 17, 18.
we usually look for conflicts like that.
As per their website. Do you want me to show Sarah? No, CDA.
That may or may not be a conflict. I mean, you know, usually people can work around it, but CDA have any comments on that? It's up to us, I guess, to decide. Well, it seems we have the best chance of getting a full complement of board members on the 17th or 18th, and 18th, so I'd suggest we pencil in that date.
Okay, I'll be late that day.
Yeah, that'd be good if that's easier
I
for
can-
you, and it's going to be in Southern California, hopefully, depending on
I can-
availability.
I can make it if it's Southern California.
I understand.
Okay.
Okay, moving along to August. We have a choice of the 16th, 17th, or the 23rd, 24th.
And I'll just jump in and say that Meredith is not available August 16th and 17th.
Okay, seeing no other objections, I would like to suggest the 23rd and 24th. Okay, November, December 2018, we have December 6th and 7th, or November 29th and 30th.
Dr. Witcher, I'm sorry, may I interrupt just for a minute? Can I want to go back to the May dates.
Okay.
That's a meeting that I like to attend in Anaheim, and you said we could work around it, and I'm trying to figure out, I mean, yeah, we can be in Anaheim, but if we're going to be attending this board meeting, we're not going to be available to go to that meeting, and that's a meeting that I like to go to.
Now, according to this, CDA is the 3rd and 4th. So is that not true? Can you at least tell us whether that's true or not? Okay.
When board staff originally looked at the website, and I believe I saw it as well, it was originally scheduled for May 3rd and 4th, and that's why it's
Okay.
reflected on this calendar.
So they had to change it.
And wasn't there someone else here that wasn't available on the 17th?
Yeah, I don't think Meredith is available on
But-
the,
What was your date that you weren't available? Was it May 17th?
10th.
yeah, May
May
10th and
10th.
11th, right.
Sometimes we actually move the board meeting up if people want to go to CDA, and we happen to have it in Southern California. So if the board members would be amenable to having the board meeting on Wednesday, Thursday, instead of Thursday, Friday, I suppose that's something we could check out. Staff, do you see a conflict with that?
No, the other option is we could do it May 3rd and 4th as well, because those are the dates we originally thought CDA Presents were being held.
Okay, I don't have Ms. McKenzie's availability, but if everybody else is available, we could certainly go that route.
I could do them 3rd and 4th.
So what's the will of the board?
I am not good for May 3rd or 4th.
Okay.
I can do that.
That'll work for me.
What about coming in to, if we have the meeting in the Anaheim area during the
16th and
CDA?
17th?
Do it 16, 17, so that would be Wednesday, Thursday. Dr. Stewart, would that accommodate you?
That'll work for me, yes, thank you.
I won't be here on the 16th, but I could be there on the 17th.
Okay. Okay, so I feel like an auctioneer.
Is this, Karen, is the 16th, 17th, the Tuesday and Wednesday?
It
did
would
you
be
say?
Wednesday,
Wednesday,
Thursday.
Thursday.
Wednesday, Thursday. We have done that before. So I think what we're looking at right now is perhaps May 16, 17 for next year. And of course, then we would obviously tie it to, the location would be in Southern California, preferably in Anaheim. So are board members available on Wednesday and Thursday, the 16th and 17th of May?
I'll be available. I'm just going to be arriving late. That's me.
I'm sorry?
I'll be arriving late on Tuesday. I'm sorry, on Wednesday. But,
Okay.
I'll be here.
Everybody else available?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so it looks like we'll change that to 16, 17.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. Moving ahead to November, December, we have a choice of November 29th, 30th, and December 6th and 7th. I'll start with the earlier date. Is the November 29th and 30th date okay with everyone?
Ms. McKenzie's not available on December 7th.
Okay, well then that clinches it.
Everybody else?
It'll be the 29th and 30th unless I hear otherwise.
And just to let board members know, I mean, we're attempting to get this done ahead of time because we're really finding it difficult to get hotels. And so we're trying to get more leeway to see if that's going to be helpful. But we also recognize that things occur, family illnesses or some other event occurs. And so I would just ask that if you can't attend the meeting, as soon as you know that, if you would send me an email so that we can make sure that we'll have a quorum for the meeting. So I appreciate that you've checked your calendars and we'll move forward looking into 2019. But we also recognize things will probably be changing for everybody along the way, and we'll just try to keep on top of that.
Okay, so we're going to venture into doing a second year here. February 7th and 8th.
What are the November, December dates?
29th and 30th of November. Okay, again, moving with the earliest date first, February 7th and 8th of 2019. I realize that's a long way off, but we're just going to try to get these dates as close as we can. Seeing no objections?
Ms. McKenzie is not available the 21st and 22nd. Apparently, that's President's Day weekend.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I may not be available February 7th or 8th, but I would recommend I would recommend the 7th and 8th because of that
Holiday.
3-day weekend. Many people take it off.
Yeah. Makes sense. Okay, moving ahead to May, 16th and 17th of May, 2019.
Oh, we're really getting in.
Now, do we know CDA's dates for this meeting?
No, 2019.
2019, same dates?
Well, there's no reason we can't have it on the 9th and 10th. Okay, 9th and 10th it is, unless we want to do the same thing. If people like going to CDA and they're down there anyway and it's in Anaheim, there is an advantage to doing a Wednesday, Thursday. So we could maybe do the same thing in 2019 if it works for 2018.
And Ms. McKenzie's not available May 9th and 10th unless it's someplace close.
So we would do it the 15th and 16th maybe, and,
Yep,
okay.
we can, if that works.
15.
19.
2019. Okay. August 15th and 16th.
Ms. McKenzie has a conflict August 8th and 9th, both days.
Okay, well, let's make it on the 15th, 16th anyway. That was good.
Do we usually plan this far?
No.
Okay,
This is new.
okay,
We're going to try it to see if we get better options for hotels.
okay.
Yeah, that's always a challenge. Okay, moving along to November 21st and 22nd.
I'm having trouble looking at my calendar that far out. Is that
You wanna-
right before Thanksgiving? Yeah, I should have picked up my phone, but
It would be the week before Thanksgiving.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, usually it's on, the Thanksgiving's usually toward the end of the month.
is there any option after Thanksgiving? Usually, I thought we did do it after.
It's really tough.
Well,
Because then we're into almost into December, and between Thanksgiving and December.
well, 2018, we're doing it after Thanksgiving, so that's why.
And last year and the year before, I think we did it December 1st and 2nd or
Yeah,
something like that.
that's possible.
We did. One of the issues we've encountered with the December meetings, though, is the deadline for omnibus bill proposals has already passed or is coming up, so it may be beneficial to have the board take action earlier in November so that we can meet the early December deadlines that the committees typically set for the boards and bureaus.
That will also be sunset review.
Well, then I would recommend the earlier date, because the later date, your travel costs go up, and, you know,
Okay,
14th and
so
15th, I'm okay.
we're talking about the 21st and 22nd then?
No,
The
the 14th.
14, 15.
14,
Or the I'm
15.
sorry, 14th. Okay, well, let's go with the 14th and 15th then. And again, this is way out there, so we may adjust depending, and we'll, of course, keep everybody informed with plenty of advance notice.
I like this optimism that we will all be healthy and in good shape then.
I wanted to just give you a heads up, too. Depending on how, so next year is the year the board submits its report to the legislature for sunset review, if you can believe we're there already again. And you'll recall that the last time we did this, essentially the board needs to approve the report before it's submitted. So I think we're still, the deadlines for submittal of that report have been somewhat flexible. Some years it's been October 1st, some years it's been December 1st. So just to give you a little heads up, we're going to try to work around the scheduled board meetings to have that report prepared for you so that we don't have to schedule a special meeting. But we'll try to give you advance notice if there's a reason why we would have to schedule essentially an additional meeting to the 4 that we already have on the calendar. So kind of reserving the right to let you know we may have to have a special meeting.
Before we leave this, can we have a little discussion on location and what's an option to San Francisco?
Of course.
So that's the question. What is some other option besides San Francisco?
Well, we had the discussion a couple of years ago about what the requirement is of where we're supposed to hold the meetings. And it was our prior legal counsel's opinion that the locations in statute were there when we were testing, when we were giving a dental exam. So I know that certain administrations, governors want the boards to have their meetings in the north and south and central in order to accommodate public members that may want to come. So staff is open to suggestions of where board members would want to meet. Now, that being said, I know that we've had a request to have it in the San Jose area, and we have tried to do that, but unfortunately, and we're finding this more and more with all cities, they're not willing to take the state rate. And so we're going to have to be creative on how we can still schedule these meetings in these areas at these hotels with perhaps some sort of a waiver. So I would say if board members have a specific request, let's hear it, and if you come up with it later, send me an email, and staff will work diligently to see if we can try to accommodate that request.
Through the board, President, I heard her mention Central. It might be time to invite everybody to Bakersfield.
I think I know of a hotel.
From what I understand, we just can't get through the fog in the fall or December, so we probably, and we don't want to be there in the heat. So what do we have left?
We do have Fresno.
Yeah.
We do have Fresno for Central. You could draw it.
So, Ms. Burton, what did you have a specific request, or you'd rather see it someplace other than San Francisco, or?
I just think we need to explore the Bay Area more in terms of our ability to get in and out, both people who are flying and people who need to drive too.
Okay.
I do know that we looked at San Jose, but the hotels were prohibitive. And so, I don't know, I would defer to somebody else who knows the Bay Area to say. I know that people liked Oakland the year that we were there, but then I think the next year we weren't able to find accommodations.
One year it was pretty scary.
Yeah.
Well, I think staff just needs to continue to work on this with the idea that Greater Bay Area would be an acceptable alternative to San Francisco. And, you know, it kind of just depends on where we can find something. I mean, I guess we could go up to Fairfield or something like that, but, you know, get on the outskirts, and that'd be closer to Sacramento. I know there are hotels up there where other groups have had things, so just whatever we can come up with.
Staff will take note of this, and we'll put our heads together and see what we can come up with. We may survey board members to see if they have specific requests. We've received some, Dr. Stewart, Ms. Yvette-Chappelle, Ingram, Ms. King. So if anybody else has any recommendations, just send them to us. I think what we look at is ease of getting to the meeting, along with the amount of the cost of the meeting. Essentially, Bakersfield is a good idea because everybody would have to drive. So
Fresno.
Well, some people could take their golf cart.
Yeah.
too.
So we'll take all these things into consideration, that maybe you want to shake
And
it
I
up a
think I
little
would
bit.
suggest looking at maybe Emeryville. There are a number of hotels there.
And then have people flying to Oakland?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Well-
We'll look into it.
Well, one of the things that I've shared with Karen too, especially if you're coming into the Los Angeles area or Burbank, I did visit a hotel there that will probably work for us. If they don't, then we don't do it, but it's 10 minutes from the airport. And it's an airport, you could Uber there, you can do, and it's a really nice hotel. So I just brought the package, and so if you're visiting a hotel, you know, perhaps we can ask some of the catering services there, and I'm more than willing, because I'm in Northern California quite a bit, to talk with some people as well and just help the staff out as well if they're willing to take our rate. That's it.
Well, I think we have some direction there. So with that, I'd like to move on to item number 6, the budget report.
Good morning. My name is Zach Rasky, and I'm the budget analyst with the board. Today, I'll be presenting the budget report, which focuses on expenditures for fiscal year 16 and 17. we're going to be handing out the fund conditions for both dentistry and the dental assisting.
Okay, well, we can skip down.
The data for this report was provided by the Department of Consumer Affairs, and it reflects expenditures as of 6/30/2017. So as of 6/30/2017, the board spent roughly $11 million, or 85% of the total dentistry fund for fiscal year 16-17. Of that amount, approximately 5.7 million was for expenditures, for personnel services, and 5.3 million was for operating expenditures. For comparison purposes, last year the board spent roughly 11 million, or 98% of its expenditures at this point. Approximately 49% of the expenditures were for personnel services, and 51% were for operation and equipment. If you turn to the fund condition for the dentistry fund, you'll see the months in reserve go from 5.7 to 3.1 to 0.5. So by fiscal year 18-19, the fund will be insolvent. However, we are working on fee increases, which will reverse that trend.
Excuse me,
Yes.
could you move just a little slower? Because we
I'm sorry.
just got this, and
Okay.
I'm not getting to where you are.
Oh,
Every
I'm
time
sorry.
you say a number,
Yes.
I'm seeing a different number, so.
Okay. So I'm looking at the fund condition, which was handed out. And if you look at the bottom for the months in reserve, you'll see it says 5.7 for actual of 2015-16. And then for this year, it goes to 3.1 and 0.5 for 17-18. So the trend is showing that we are depleting the months in reserve. But we are working on implementing fee increases, which will reverse that trend. And that will be basically for application, those kinds of fees, which will help us replenish basically the months in reserve.
So I have questions. So you have to remind me, didn't we just have a fee increase?
No, I believe that you guys voted and we passed a fee increase, and it's currently in the regulation process. I think Sarah can speak more to that process.
We'll have an update on the regulatory status, but maybe Sarah has a comment.
We did do a fee increase in 2013, and then again, there was a statutory fee increase to the renewals in 2015, but the board did vote in 2016 to approve the rulemaking that we're currently working on, and it's going through that approval process right now. So we're anticipating that become effective this fiscal year, and we'll see an increase in our fund reserves starting in 18-19.
And Sarah, do you know what effect that would have? I mean, is there a way to get us a copy of this with those numbers plugged in to see what effect it will have?
Not at this time, because when we're looking at the fund condition, it's always a snapshot in time, and so it's based off the governor's budget. And until we actually collect that revenue, they don't provide us with those copies. Now, when we went through the fee increase rulemaking, we had projections included in that rulemaking as well. And we were looking at increasing our funds in reserve to an average of 3 to 5 months worth of reserves at any given time, which is where we want to be.
Yeah, my concern is, I think we should do our own extrapolation, because going into a year, every year lower, bringing in a fund balance that's lower, then your expectations may not meet your needs with that starting point. And so it's hard to tell with what we've even voted on whether we're going to build a 5-month, unless you extrapolate at these lower starting points.
Well, we're constantly working with the budget office to ensure that our fee increases are going to cover our expenses. So At this point in time, it's a snapshot in time. Every day there's a delay in the implementation of the fee increase, it would impact the fund condition. We, of course, can present that at the next meeting if that's what the board would like to see, the projections based on the anticipated fee increase, but they would be projections and they would be just a snapshot in time.
Okay, and I have two more questions then. So,
And just, if I could just stop for a minute. We did do projections when we passed the rulemaking prior to that. And I don't know that we would gain anything by doing new ones. We would more or less come up with those same figures, I would assume. I mean, I know there's a time element here that affects things, but I mean, it's like the projections are available if people really want to look at them.
but I think the projections were done that it would pass sooner, I thought. I'm trying to remember back, that were the projections done that the new fees wouldn't go into place for another?
No, the projections that we had were putting the effective date as of July 1st, 2017. And so with the delay of the implementation due to the rulemaking package, it's being continually pushed back. So we're continuing to work with the budget office on a day-to-day basis to do an analysis of our fund condition. But it's not an actual, it's difficult to tell. At this point, we're anticipating that if OAL approves the rulemaking by the end of this month, that the process would dictate that we need to implement the fees in our BREEZE system at that point. The release for those fees wouldn't happen until probably early November, and we wouldn't begin collecting that revenue until February.
So that's a 7-month delay. My concern is if we ended the year at 3.1 with a 7-month delay, what will that mean as months in reserve for the end of this year? I don't think it's hard to do that projection. I mean, it's...
We
can
Sarah, we
provide-
can talk, we can talk to the budget office and try to, we'll take this conversation offline between you and me to see specifically what you have in mind. But I think because we have historically had this $1 million reversion, that continues to be our float. We're not happy with it. But I think once the fees actually do kick in through regulation, and we had expected that it would be farther along. We've hit some glitches along the road with changes in staff at different levels that have to review this, sort of out of our control. And we have expressed our urgency in having to move this forward. We are not to the point where, well, if we somehow get to the point where we can't reach the insolvency, so we will be flagged well before that.
Mm-hmm.
But it is critical that we get this approved by OAL and get it into our BREEZE system. I'm expecting that it will probably take a 2-year renewal cycle with fees, renewals and permit fees and all those things before the board can really see, can rise to the level in their checking account, in their savings account of having that 3 to 6 month cushion. It's going to take a while.
Yeah, my concern is we put in fee increases, and if we've lost 7 months, did
Right.
we put in fee increases enough to protect us for those 7 months? We haven't been getting the fee increases. It's not
Yeah.
easy to...
Right. We will try to bring back a report that is a little more clear for you on how that, I mean, to some degree, we trust that the budget office is going to make sure that we are going to get what we get. But I certainly see where you're coming from in terms of we will try to work on getting you that projected income.
Yeah, it may be too late to ask for a change in those increases to permits, but with a 7-month delay, I'm just wondering if we need to ask for that.
You mean increase beyond the regulatory packet that's already there? I
Yeah.
think we anticipated that there could be lags.
So annually, we typically have a reversion at the end of the fiscal year, and the final numbers aren't in yet, but I just checked with Budget Office this last week, and we are looking at a substantial reversion this year with the closeout. So that reversion, in essence, is building our cushion and allowing us that cushion to last us that 7 months. Now,
Okay.
anything beyond that is questionable, and that's why we continue to work with the budget office and ensure that we stay on top of that.
And Sarah, I'm sorry, I don't remember what reversion means. Does it mean what you didn't spend goes back into your
Yes.
reserve?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, okay. So
Yes.
that will help with
Right.
that 7-month lag.
We've,
Okay.
we've historically spent under our appropriation.
Okay.
And we've been trying to be diligent about it for the last couple of years and what we're spending so that because of the fee increases that we've been going through.
And that's not built into this?
No, this is assuming full appropriation expenditure.
Okay, I have one last question on renewal fees. Maybe somebody asked this last meeting, but we are dropping, is it less dentists? We dropped from 10.2 to 9.6 to 9.85.
Well, these are anticipated, and as she was saying, there's a fiscal month 13 report, which is the closeout expenditures. So there will be, basically what happens is there are a bunch of invoices and all kinds of things that haven't been built into the renewal fees as well, haven't been built into the report that was provided to us as of June 30th. So the next report will have a significant increase in that, and these, it's a projected. So they use, basically it's a formula, so it's averaging out prior years. So that's how they're coming up with the numbers for next year, and then right now for this year is just as of June 30th. So you could see it go up significantly, and it might even out to what we brought in last
So do you
fiscal year.
think 2016-17 was just an anomaly in its dip, or do you see a trend of less permits being
The
applied
revenue
to?
projections that are included in the current year and the budget year are based off of workload projections that we work with the budget office, but we do them a year to a year in advance of the fiscal year. So, and we base those on a 5-year average of what we're seeing. So if there was a dip one year, you may see a difference in the projected population count for total revenue generation. At this point, at the November meeting, I would expect to have the final closeout, and you'll have a better reflection of what the actual revenue was that we brought in for 16-17. Working with the budget office closely, they tend to do their projections on a conservative side to ensure that we're still generating what we need to.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so moving on to the dental assisting fund. As of June 30th, the board spent approximately $2.1 million, or 80% of its dental assisting fund appropriation. Of that amount, roughly $742,000 or $743,000 was for personnel services, and $1.3 million was for operations and equipment. For comparison purposes, last year the board spent roughly $653,000 or 100%, or sorry, $2 million or 100% of its dental assisting fund appropriations. And of that, approximately $653,000 was for personnel services and $1.4 million was for operation. So if you turn to the fund condition for the dental assisting, it has a similar trend of 4 months in reserve. So 15-16 went from 11.6 to 7.0 this fiscal year and 2.8 next fiscal year, and it will deplete as in the 18-19. But we are working on fee increases as well for that, which will reverse the trend and should restore our months in reserve. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Will the suspension of the practical have an effect on this for the dental assisting?
Yes, we will see some sort of a savings in that we're not having to pay for the facilities, but at the same time, you're going to notice that we're not generating the revenue because the candidates aren't paying for it. So it should essentially equate to a wash in that situation, but that is something that we're monitoring very closely. Of course, it's only been 2 or 3 exam cycles, so we haven't noticed a significant trend, but we are making sure that the revenue would equate to the expenses so that we don't see a dip in our reversion, or I'm sorry, in our months in reserve.
I have another question to go back to, and it's kind of with Mrs. King. Are we required by statute to have notice of fee increases a certain amount of time? Because we were talking about the 7 months, and we only have, let's say, what, 4 months before we go into 18-19 already. So do we have to have a notice in terms of how much notice we have to give for fee increases?
Well, specifically, no, but according to the rulemaking process, however, they've built in quarterly effective dates for all rulemakings, essentially to build in a 3-month notice period for licensees or anybody impacted by regulations, and that's statewide. With our regulatory package, though, it's been going through the process for 18 months to 2 years at this point. I'm pretty sure everybody's pretty aware of what we're anticipating. Now, when we do implement, and it's going to have to go into Breeze, when we have the release, the renewal notices that are going to go out in November would be for the February renewal cycle. So they would essentially get that 3-month notice at that point.
Okay.
I have another. So I'm going to go back to this one more time. The expenses on both the dental assisting and the dental board are up about, they're showing 30% at the end of this fiscal year, or end of last fiscal year. So you're saying that's not necessarily real because they budget conservatively?
No, the expenses are into, the revenue is budgeted conservatively. The expenses are based on actuals, and then averages of actuals. Now, we typically see, in the governor's budget, they build in a 2.5% increase in expenditure appropriations annually. So we have seen an increase in our expenditures over the years, especially given the last several years, and a lot of that has to do with administrative costs and IT costs associated with different programs that the boards and bureaus are implementing.
So you're saying these expenditure costs being up 30% in dental assisting and 30% in the dental board are real?
Yes.
That's a pretty large jump in expenses, 30% from year to year. Is there going to be maybe more discussion about that? Because in my business, that would be pretty big concerning.
Right. If you have specific questions about line items, we'd be happy to dive into those more. It is something that we're diving into more. And Karen, if you want to expand on that, there are certain costs that are out of our control that we are billed for, and we don't have necessarily the approval to give to take those expenses, but they're essential to the functionality of the board's operation.
I wanted to question too whether if the Breeze costs are considered in this. You know that over the past couple of years, our Breeze costs have been pretty high. We're hoping that that's going to level out at some point. So I don't see that we're necessarily going to have the increases that you have seen in the past, I'll say 3 years moving forward. I think that the Breeze expense levels out next year maybe. But we can bring those specifics back to a future board meeting.
Yeah, I think it's good to look at that 30% and kind of break down what's in that 30% and what's likely to go away and what's not. Just because we may get this, we'll get this increase in permit costs through, but we should be figuring out how long do we go before we have to do it again. And if there's a 30% increase in costs, it's going to be pretty quick that we may have to do it again, unless, you know, or unless half of that's Breeze.
We don't have, and unfortunately, we didn't have updated Breeze costs to share today, but I'm hopeful that we'll have them at the next meeting. So I think that will also shed some light on our increased costs that we've encountered over the last few years.
Well, I'd love to see, even before the next meeting, a breakdown of that 30% and how much is going to be real going forward and how much is going to go away, because that's a pretty big growth in a year of costs.
Is there any public comment on this? I mean, this is mostly an update, and it doesn't require any action, as I understand it, but is there anybody? in the audience that would like to comment on this? Seeing none, I'm going to change the order of the items of business. Our DAC members had a little trouble with their plane getting in, and I know others have experienced that. So to allow them time to arrive at the meeting so we can have the joint meeting, I'm going to move the Substance Abuse Awareness Committee meeting up. And let's go ahead with that item. So if we could have the Substance Abuse Committee, Awareness Committee members remain on the dais and the others, please have a seat in the audience. We'll have that report.
Which one?
What are we doing right now? We're going to drop down and start our committee meetings just for this one item to give the DAC members a chance to get here, and then
So what's the first group called?
Substance Abuse Awareness Committee meeting.
Maybe call out who it is.
There's a separate agenda for that item.
I don't want to close that.
Okay, Dr. Stewart.
Carlos, are you working your way up to?
Of course, the DAC members arrive.
This should be short.
I'd like to call the Substance Use Awareness Committee a meeting to order. And with the help of our staff, I'd like to, Carlos, can you call the, establish a quorum? Roll call.
Jerry's going to call the roll.
Chappelle Ingram. Here. Stewart.
Here?
Witcher.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's move to item number 2, approval of the May 11 Substance Use Awareness Committee meeting minutes.
So moved.
Do we need to take a vote on that?
Yeah, you need to ask for public comment.
Oh, public comment, please. Seeing none?
Chappelle Ingram.
Or you're voting to accept
We're
the minutes.
Okay. Stewart.
Yes.
Witcher.
Yes.
It has passed. The motion has passed.
Thank you. Let's move on to item number 3, diversion program report and statistics. Carlos?
Thank you very much, and good morning. Carlos Alvarez, Chief of Enforcement. And I'm here to report the substance abuse diversion report. And so this quarter was ending June 30th of 2017. And as you can see, there hasn't been really been a change to the referrals or participants. We only had, in June, we only had one self-referral. So like I said, so nothing has changed, and currently the active participants are at 18. And currently the board is currently recruiting for public members for the position for the northern deck, a dental position on the southern deck, and a dental auxiliary position, both northern and southern. And so the next scheduled meeting for the deck will be September 7th, 2017 in Northern California. Any questions? So I'll move on to agenda item number 4. And
That's the implementation for Senate Bill 482. And as you all remember, Senate Bill 482 required healthcare practitioners authorized to prescribe or order, administer, or furnish controlled substance to consult with the Cure database. And as of July 13th of 2017, this Senate bill has not been triggered yet because the Department of Justice still doesn't have the adequate staff to do this. So therefore, this Senate bill or the health and safety rules are not triggered yet. And so I'll keep that as we move on, and I'll get dates from the Department of Justice. I will provide that, an update for that.
This is the requirement that prescribers who prescribe more than a 5-day supply have to query cures. There's already an existing requirement that went through last year that everybody with a DEA has to register. So people should be registered. Maybe they don't have to use it, but just to clarify that.
Carlos, just a question for you. There seems to be some confusion, at least in the community that I'm from, in terms of the implementation of this particular statute. And I'm wondering if we should strive to put something, maybe something is on our website, I just haven't seen it, that keeps the interested stakeholders, the community at large, abreast of these issues so that everybody's on the same page.
Yes, because we had discussions on that, and in order to do that, we were talking about developing like a handout as we go in, and as a routine as we go into these dental offices to conduct like our investigations, to pass out a handout and make them aware of this. And we want to make that routine now.
What do you think about the idea of an update on our website so that people that are looking for information can see it?
Yes, I agree to that, and like I said, we have discussions, sit down, and so we can implement that, and that's one way of doing it. Yes, is our website.
Okay, thank you.
I know CDA has current information on this. They have a whole page devoted to this.
If there's no other questions, we'll move on to agenda item number 5. And it's just what we're talking about is cures, the registration and usage, and the controlled substance review and evaluation system 2.0. It's a database for schedules 2, 3, and 4 controlled substance and prescription dispense in California. And as with the Dental Board of California currently has 34,015 active licensed dentists, the DEA has 24,633 California dentists who are licensed to prescribe. And the cures registration statistics for the Dental Board of California are for May of 2017, it was 7,766. So for June 2017, July 2017, it went up by, we had 57 that registered for June of 2017, then it went up by 2 to 59 on July 2017. And so it brought up the registered dentist DMD 7,882. And for the usage for Dental Board, for the numbers have dropped here for the usage. So in May 2017, it was 990 users. June 2017, it was 1,037 usage, and July 2017 was 784. And again, as we discussed, is make this a routine so we go in, pass out the handouts, and like I said, to make the DDS aware of this, so start using the cure system. But one of the things that we might look at this as the numbers drop is perhaps that DDS are probably prescribing less, and because of the opiate awareness. So perhaps that's why the numbers have dropped, but I can't say that for 100% for sure.
The fact remains, though, that we have a large discrepancy between people who hold DEAs and those who have registered.
That's
and so
correct.
Clearly, just a little over a quarter of the people who should have registered have registered. So in spite of all the publicity that went out, I don't know what people, I guess there's a lack of awareness or something, or maybe, it's not that hard to register. I mean, if the office has a computer, you can usually figure it out.
Yes, and like I said, and the discussions that we had is making this routine when we walk into dental offices. Again, like on our website to publicize that and make everybody aware of the cure system.
I think Dr. Witcher made mention of the fact that, a lot of publicity's been out there that this is supposed to have been done, and I'm a little disappointed in these numbers. They're fairly low, and I'm just wondering if we should have a discussion on this committee in terms of what we can do to see those numbers increase.
Well, I think Carlos mentioned that they're going to do some outreach, and I think the need has been recognized, and we'll see what we can do.
I am also disappointed with the numbers, and although Carlos is and his team is going to be doing some outreach, what kinds of outreach are we talking? One-offs? Are we talking a big plan? What is the plan to increase those numbers? That's number one.
Right.
What are the plans to increase those numbers? Because sometimes numbers are increased by, unfortunately, consequences. And so what are our plans if this needle doesn't move at all?
And like you said, and that's what we want to avoid is avoid those consequences. And that's what we want to do. And like I said, so we sat down and we started, actually, when we saw these numbers, we're going to develop a plan, and I started noting everything down is how to improve that, and we came up with a website, we came up with a handout, and making a routine for Northern and Southern. So like I said, so we're going to try to develop something here, outreach with other, we could do it with, CDA, get together, and we can put this together to make it aware of the cure system in order to improve these numbers.
Can we talk about improving the numbers by indicating the benefits of it rather than the consequences?
Yes, because this
sometimes.
goes along with the substance abuse awareness. So we could put all that together because that's how we're going to increase this and also develop the plan, like I said, also at the same time as substance use awareness. And we'll bundle all that up together.
Ideally, where should this number be? Ideally.
The portion, where, I'm sorry.
34,000. 015. No,
Yeah, everybody
no.
who has a DEA should have registered.
24,633.
Okay.
So-
And so,
So yeah, we're probably needing reach out to another 23,000, yes.
And I think that's an interesting comment because somebody may have a DEA license who really doesn't use it. And they don't realize, they think because they don't use it that they don't need to register. So that may be an issue. I think that once this committee sort of lands on their recommendation for a mission statement, I think all of it can be tied together, and then the committee can be working on a communication plan.
I would love it.
Which I think would be a good committee assignment, to be working on a communication plan to get this word out, essentially.
My next question has to do with usage, in terms of the uses. What determines, I know that you'll go in and see how many hits have been there, but typically, is that number, as a, given the fact that we have, like 7.8 thousand that have registered, the uses, how are the uses determined? Could that be one doctor using it 3 or 4 times, or is it per doctor?
It should, actually, the way the usage is they're going to dispense any Schedule 2, 3, or 4. That actually should be per patient, that they're going in and looking at this, because they have to look at if this patient, because it'll show if they're actually been prescribed any type of prescription opiates. And that's what this system is for. So actually, when they're going into it, and if there's prescribing for these Schedules 2, 3, or 4, is per patient. So it could actually be either one dentist, or it's just per patient that we're looking at, that they're using this
Right.
database.
Okay.
I think as we see cures fully implemented, those numbers will go up because people will start querying it. I know I've got delegates set up in my office and I'm having them start working on it now, so when that does go into effect, we'll have the capability of doing it and it won't be a big learning curve. I don't know how many people are doing that, but I think when it becomes clear that's a
And Carlos, to your point, I think that I've noticed in my practice certainly that I see fewer people that I would describe as shopping for medication. And I think that the public is much more aware that this is a topic that's on front and center of all of our plates. And so I'm prescribing less Vicodin, I can assure you that. And I think that I'm not seeing as many people come through my office with the same tooth needing a root canal a year ago and asking for more help. So it's something's working. But I think we need to, I like the idea of strengthening that communication plan, and that's something we can work on moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are we also gathering data in terms of communities, whereas it would be, where the usage or the counties in which?
Yes, we can. We can break it down into counties, and I have done that because I've been contacted by Ventura County. They have a task force, and they were kind of looking into, like I say, getting numbers, and yes, we're able to do that where we could actually identify which counties are actually prescribing more or prescribing less.
Right.
So we do have that capability.
So we could zone in on.
Yes.
Okay.
The unfortunate side effect of this is a lot of the use is being moved underground, and I think that's one reason we're seeing things like fentanyl and prescription drug overdoses. I know there's been a big spike in our emergency room, and so they're, although they may start with non-medical use, a lot of that is being moved by the pressure into other venues.
Hmm.
So if we have any more questions, we'll move into item number 6. Item number 6 is the update regarding the statewide prescription opiate misuse and overdose prevention group meeting. And so the meeting that we had on June 28th, 2017, and there was a new resource out there, a new educational resource for opiate prescribers in California has been developed by the Partnership for Drug-Free Kids and with the support of a grant from the Food and Drug Administration. And the website is called Search and Rescue, and it connects prescribers, especially family physicians.
Carlos,
Yes.
could you speak into the mic, please? Thanks.
Sorry. And so this website, I'll say it again, is Search and Rescue, and it connects prescribers, especially family physicians, with free resources that can help identify at-risk patients in their practice, and so they could prescribe responsibly. And so there's tools and resources that are linked to this website. So there's a link, each state prescription drug monitor program also has opiate risk tools and evidence-based screeners that can help identify at-risk patients. It has the CDC's guidelines on prescribing opiates for chronic pain, information on alternatives to opiates for management of chronic pain, information on medication for assisted treatment, and also has Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration treatment locator. And what this is if a physician feels that their patient needs some type of help and has an issue with opiates, they could log on to this website, and it's all confidential. So anybody could go in, a patient or a physician could go in, and everything is confidential. And I actually went into the website just to test it, and I put the zip code for Sacramento, and it gave me approximately about 40 locations for treatment programs. And it actually gives you how far you're away from these treatment centers. So it's a really good database that we have and a tool that it's out there for California physicians. And so for the next, and so one of the things is the statewide prescription opiate misuse overdose prevention work group is recommending a name change for the work group. And currently that's being recommended as statewide opiate safety work group, SOS. And so what they want to do is remove prescription away from the name, and they want to just concentrate on the opiate epidemic that's affecting the public health crisis and opiates that's being misused. So what they want to do is educate everybody on the opiate itself and not on prescription. And that's one of the reasons they want to do the name change, and they want to increase the awareness on the opiates. And so our next meeting for that would be August 23rd, 2017, and I'll find out more if that name change went into effect.
Thank you, Carlos.
And next up was mission statement.
Yes, I'll take that one.
Good, thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
I think Dr. Witcher did a great job of, when he opened the meeting, of discussing the breadth of the problem and talking about how many people are dying each day. I know that there was a newscast on, I heard this last week, and the report on the radio suggested that every 3 weeks, enough people the people that are dying from opioid abuse is equaling what happened the day of September 11th. And it's, when you think of those numbers in that short period, it's just absolutely staggering. And while those big numbers are terrible to think about, I think many of us in this room, I won't ask for a show of hands, but I have friends personally that have lost children. I have friends that are raising their grandkids because of this problem. And so it's one that is just an incredibly important issue, and I think that we all need to work as hard as we can to do our part in mediating this issue and helping our colleagues understand and educating our public, our patients, in terms of the potential dangers. And to that end, we've talked about moving forward with a communication plan. We've talked about beefing up our website, and I was made aware of that's all good and fine, but there's an order that we need to go through. And so the first thing we need to do is come up with a mission statement that this committee and then our board can stand on. And I reached out to staff, I reached out to Karen, and it started with a conversation between she and I in terms of what we thought we should include in this statement. Karen agreed to work on the wording, and so you see the background in front of you in item 7, and you see the draft statement of the mission statement. And I credit Dr. Witcher for moving in, and he's got a great way with words, and he took a look at what we had and he strengthened it, and we've agreed that this final draft statement is worthy of review of this committee. And so I would hope that we can accomplish getting this as a statement moving forward from this board to present to the full board, and then we'll be in a better position to move forward with that communication plan and do those kinds of things that we think need to be done to help the situation. So with that comment, I'll open it up to this committee for any comments regarding this draft statement.
Well, I've already had a shot at this. Yvette, do you have any comments you'd like to add?
Are
Do-
you okay with the mission statement
I
that's
am
here in the
okay.
binder? Oh, okay.
Yes, I think we had discussed this mission statement, and I firmly
Do we need
approve of
do we
it.
need to vote on this as a subcommittee? I'm hearing yes, so would you mind calling the roll, please?
Do you want public comment?
Oh, public comment first. All right.
I think we need a motion and a second.
I'll move it.
And I'll second.
That's okay.
Now, any public comment on the draft statement? Seeing none, call the vote.
Yes. Stewart,
Yes.
Witcher,
Yes.
we have a motion that passed.
So just to clarify, the motion essentially was to recommend that the board adopt the proposed policy statement that's in the board packet.
Thank you, Karen. So let's see. I think we're moving on to item number 8, public comment on items not on the agenda. Seeing none, future agenda items. Thank you. And, yes,
Will we be, where do we go from here? Should we agendize that, or where do we go from here and we launch from this mission statement?
we will be looking at strengthening our website in terms of resources for our colleagues, the dental professionals, as well as the public. And we will be looking at ways to increase the awareness of this issue among the colleagues, the dental community in California. And this committee will play a vital role in all of that.
Fantastic, thank you.
Public comments? Oh, Dr. Atchison.
Hi, public comment on agenda items?
What are you wanting to speak on? It'll be fine, whatever.
What Dr. Witcher was talking about, SB 482 and the requirement to ping cures before we make a prescription. And repeatedly, I understood we're not required to check cures if it's no more than a 5-day supply of narcotics. But I think it's more restricted than that. It's only 5-day supply for surgical procedures. And you're an oral surgeon, but as a general dentist, that would be a lot more restrictive for things coming in with abscess tooth problems, pulpal problems. So I think we need to be clear on what that 5-day restriction is, especially if you're going to post something on your website to help inform dentists. Can we have clarification on that?
Well, typically, we would post whatever language is
Okay.
in the bill, because that's the requirement, so,
All right.
yeah.
I just wanted to be clear because this thing is broadcast to the public. Thanks.
Understood, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Atchison. Let's see, have we, I think I called for future agenda items. I didn't see any, so I think we can move on. Committee member comments on items not on the agenda? Seeing none, I think we're ready for adjournment. Thank you.
Okay, next, we'd like to move ahead with the joint meeting of the board and the DAC.
So if we can call board members and DAC members back up to the dais, please.
Two different sets. Does that work? Because remember last one was for help. That's right. Two.
So board members and DAC members, staff is going to be passing out a menu. We're going to actually submit this menu to the restaurant. We're hoping to break at noon, and then hopefully the food will be available by then. So Jerry's passing out the menus right now. If you'll take just a few minutes to fill it out, give it back to her, make sure your name is on it, and we'll be good.
Good suggestion. Good suggestion.
Jerry, if you want to start collecting the menus.
I think it's all. Oh, here it is. Sorry, Jerry. Do you think we have to pay for parking?
Okay, seeing everybody's ready, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order, and we're going to take roll separately. So, Yvette, if you could call the roll for the board,
I
please.
sure will. Yes. Roll call. Burden. Chan. Forsythe. King. King.
Here.
Lai.
Here.
Legg. Medina.
Here.
Morrow. Stewart. Witcher.
Here.
We
And
have a
now the-
quorum.
Now the roll for the DAC.
Contreras. Here. Davis Washington. Here. And Rodriguez.
Okay, so we have up for approval the May 11th joint meeting minutes. there's no comments, could I have a motion? So moved by Forsyth, second. Second Contreras. Any additions, corrections to the meeting minutes? Seeing none, public comment? It appears we're ready to vote.
Okay. Burton? Chan? Forsythe?
Yes.
King?
Yes.
Lai?
Yes.
Lay? Medina?
Yes.
Morrow? Stewart? Witcher?
Yes.
We have a,
Contreras?
yes.
Davis Washington? Rodriguez? We
Okay,
have a
that
motion
passes, thank you.
for passing.
Okay, moving along, item number 3, update on dental assisting program and course applications.
Sarah Wallace, Assistant Executive Officer with the Dental Board. We've provided in the board meeting packets an update on where we are with our dental assisting program and course application statistics. To date, we have received and approved 11 program and course applications for the duration of 2017, and we've conducted one full approval evaluation, site evaluation for an RDA program. We continue to receive applications on a weekly basis for several courses. The orthodontic assisting permit course seems to be a popular course to be provided. This year, we've also received applications for RDA EF programs as well, and approvals have been issued. We are working right now, I'm working with staff on a plan to ramp up our evaluation program and add our subject matter experts to our subject matter expert pool, and then also do a training within the next few months regarding course and program curriculum review and site evaluations to add to our pool of qualified subject matter experts to help us perform those tasks.
So, Sarah, do these numbers seem kind of light to you on for the programs and course applications that are being, not just approved, but even being submitted compared to the past?
No, not particular. It seems to be a consistent flow. They're pretty hefty, and we're able to accomplish the work. So I haven't noticed a big dip. Of course, we had several closures over the last few years of the big corporate colleges, so I think that probably is contributing to a reduced number of applications that we're going to be seeing. But the workload so far is manageable, and we're able to keep up with it, and we don't have a backlog on course and program review.
Yeah, I'm just concerned about the actual submittal of applications numbers, more, not you getting them approved.
Right,
but
we can look into that and see if we can, see if there's a trend.
yeah, that would be good if we could like have a graph so we can see from, year over year on if it's dipping or where we're going and which program. It seems like the orthodontic assistant is on the upward swing. Maybe the others are not as much. So just a concern, something we should watch.
Okay. Dr. Lay.
Information. How long does it take for the staff to review an application until it gets approved?
It really depends. Honestly, if it's a clean application and there's no issues with the curriculum, with the courses, we can usually turn it around within 30 to 60 days at the latest. If there's deficiencies, there's times where we're working back and forth with the program or course, so it can take time. But as soon as we're getting them, we're reviewing them and turning them around to the SME. So there hasn't been too much of a delay. I just had a course approval come in a few weeks ago, and we were able to get deficiency letters out within 3 weeks. So it's relatively quick compared to what it was several years ago.
Do we have new people doing the curriculum review?
We have, our subject matter expert has been with us for quite some time, and so we're working on recruiting additional subject matter experts to add to our pool and then getting them trained in the ways that our current subject matter expert does it. We have relatively newer staff at the board level for the education coordinator. I hired Laura Fisher in December as the lead. She's lead over our licensing unit for dental assisting, but she's also the primary educational coordinator, and so she's working on making sure all of our records are up to date and then putting the plan together for the evaluation program. But things seem to be running relatively smoothly in the program, so I'm hopeful that we're going to be able to ramp up our responsibilities here in the next few months.
Okay, seeing no other comments, let's move ahead with the update on dental assisting exam statistics.
Board staff have included the dental assisting examination statistics in your packets relative to the historical statistics for the practical exam, and then the updated for the RDAEF examinations that we've been holding, as well as excuse me, the written examinations over the last year. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Bruce, I have a question, sir. Do we have any idea when the combined written and law and ethics exam will be operational?
Yes, that is a separate agenda item, and I'd be happy to answer it now, or unless you'd like to wait.
Okay, we can wait. Okay. Another question too, or a comment, I guess I would say. In reviewing the data from the RDA written examination as it relates to the schools that are approved in the state by, I'm assuming those programs are approved by the dental board. There's over 120 plus of those schools. The pass rate on the written exam, while it is probably better than it has been on the practical exam, it is still dismal in my opinion. When we have a significant number of those schools that have a 50% or lower pass rate for their graduates on that written exam, that is hardly what I would consider a quality education that those students are receiving. And unfortunately, probably a number of them have borrowed significant amount of money in order to finance that education. And I think we don't really know for sure at this point what the combination of the written examination will turn out to be as far as outcomes are concerned. But I think that's another area of access to that profession that we need to look at in the future. And that is, I know we've been focusing on the practical examination, and that's good. But we also need to, I think, take a critical look at the written examination as also a barrier to access to the dental assisting profession.
Dr. Lai?
Sarah, I have a question on where the exams are given and the frequency and the accessibility.
The PSI written examinations?
Written.
PSI has computer-based testing centers all over the state, and I'd be happy to provide to the board and the Dental Assisting Council the list of locations. They're located everywhere. I'm not sure how many locations we actually have, but they do have ADA compliance, so if a candidate asks for reasonable accommodation or special testing accommodations, we're able to accommodate that. Essentially, we're not part of the process other than we are approving the application and then issuing electronic eligibility to PSI, which is the testing agency, to let them know that so-and-so is qualified to take the exam. And then after the examination is administered, and they'll transmit the scores back to us.
What's the wait time if they do not pass, that they can
that they can retest?
Yes.
It's typically up to 3 days, and that's because of a transmission between PSI and Breeze. The way Breeze has been set up, which has been very convenient, is that if a candidate goes to PSI, takes the test, and fails the examination, the results of the failure are transmitted directly back to Breeze. Breeze then automatically opens up a new eligibility request and sends it back to PSI. So it's about a 3 to 4 day wait time, and then the candidates can call PSI immediately to schedule their examination.
Maximum times that you can take the exam in a particular year, so they can take it as many times as.
Yes.
Dr. Stewart?
I just want to share Dr. Morrow's concerns, and I think the passing rate on those tests are so low. It's just very, very troublesome, and I'd like to know if there's anything that we could do. I mean, have we met with the educator community to discuss this issue and to see what potentially we could do to be part of a solution and get those numbers up, because they're affecting all of our practices and certainly affect each of those young people. I just am wondering, have we done anything in the past, or what can we do to be part of a solution?
I would say that if the board would like to agendize that for a future meeting, that would be the appropriate place to have the discussion.
I would agree that we should agendize that item. It's a very important subject.
I would agree as well. Thank you.
Kathleen?
I'm sorry, I don't know this, Sarah, but do they have to publish their, at the school website, do they have to publish their success rate or lack of success?
You know, I'm not familiar with the Department of Education's rules. I know that we do submit our statistics and try to put those up on the website so that they're available for the educators. I know that some programs and courses, specifically programs, are required to report. I don't know if it's to their administration or if it's for their approval process, but we can look into that. As part of this, we're also hoping to build a better relationship with the Bureau of Private Post-Secondary Education and see how our two entities can work closer together on this matter.
Yes, please.
Hello, Kara Miyazaki, Foothill College, and we have a high pass rate, just so you know. I just wanted to make a comment about the exams, and I do a review class for the law and ethics exam, and the pass rate is lower for law and ethics, but there are questions about that pertain to dentists, such as false advertising, need for referral, and a bunch of other topics that aren't related to a dental assistant that are on the exam plan that we have to explain. And it makes it confusing because they're using 3 codes of ethics. They're using the ADAA, the CDA, and the ADA code of ethics. So there's a lot of ethical terms, and there's overlap between some of the ethical terms, such as like competence is under two different. It's a subcategory under one code of ethics, and it's a category in another code of ethics. So that's what makes it confusing about the exam. There's a lot of explanation about just random topics that aren't related to a dental assistant per se, but more related to what a dentist does and their ethical principles.
I would just respond by saying that the exam plan and exam content are developed by subject matter experts, and the exam is a secure exam, so we don't have a whole lot to say, but hopefully the people from OPES will take your comment into consideration.
Thank you.
But actually, that was in the discussion from OPES in the past, where they had indicated that they thought it would be a good idea to combine the written and the law and ethics just for that reason, because a lot of the questions on the law and ethics were probably more related to dental than the assisting. So they'll be having the workshops, putting together the new exam, if you will, and we're hoping to be able to see better results.
Great, thank you.
Jennifer, yes.
Sarah, when these schools have been approved by the dental board to be accredited programs, is there any review ever again? I mean, I know there is review, I think is it every 7 years or something, but do they ever take into account the pass rate of the student and relook at, look at the pass rate of the student and then, put the school on academic probation or accreditation probation or something to?
We only have the authority to approve. We don't do an accreditation of the program.
Okay.
So that would be, some programs are CODA accredited as dental assisting programs. We do take into consideration the scores during our reevaluation and prioritization of the reevaluation. The way the current statute and regulations are written, we don't have authority to do we can withdraw approval, we can go to a provisional approval. We haven't had that happen yet, and that's something that we're looking to strengthen in the regulatory package that we're working on right now as well, to make sure that we have more of a enforcement arm in the review of the programs and courses as well.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, just to echo what has already been brought up, you know, some of these students are paying close to $20,000 to go to school. And so and some of the, I can't speak, I taught before in a for-profit school, and it's just a matter of getting a lot of bodies in there. And once they're in, they're happy because they've gotten their $20,000. And so, anyway, I just think we're doing a disservice to the future RDs or dental assistants out there.
Could I add really quickly to that piece? When you look at the accreditations for those schools, then who are the ones that are approving it and who are accountable to looking at the scores or the passage rate? Do you know who's in charge of that?
The schools are required to be approved by the dental board, but for accreditation, that's predominantly through the American Dental Association's Commission on Dental Accreditation.
Yes.
Melody Randolph. I'm the program coordinator at Sacramento City College. And I'd just like to encourage the focus to be on, you know, those of us schools that do have really good pass rate. We're proud of how challenging it is to become an RDA and the pass rate and how high our education is. The Danby exams are even harder than California exams, and they're stringent, and our students do very, very, very well on those exams. So I don't want the emphasis to be on, because it's a barrier to them becoming an RDA, that they're not passing this exam, so get rid of the exam or whatever. We need to be doing something about the schools whose pass rates are low and helping them raise the bar, not lower the bar because people aren't passing.
I don't believe the discussion is going to move toward lowering the bar for the exam. When the exam was redone a couple of years ago, there was a lot of concern that the pass rate was lower than we had hoped. But then the schools that did have high pass rates came forward and said, well, you know, we have students passing. So I think the discrepancy is in how the teaching is being done, perhaps. But OPES has verified on a number of occasions that the exam is an appropriate exam for the profession. And that, so I think knowing that, the board needs to be focusing on, okay, if the exam is appropriate, and then, as Melody had said, there are schools that have high pass rates consistently. Perhaps the board will have to look into how much authority we have to be able to work with the schools that don't have as successful a pass rate.
Yeah, just another comment in that direction. I don't know for sure if the board does, but we might want to consider looking at what are the criteria that we are going to utilize to determine whether or not the programs that we have previously approved are continued to be approved on the regular basis. I believe the programs need to resubmit for approval every 7 years, 5 years, something like that. So what criteria are we using? And this is a rhetorical question, not expecting an answer at this point, but what are the criteria that we're using as to whether or not we reapprove them? Are we simply looking at the curriculum content, or are we looking at outcomes assessment of that educational process? I think those are important things for us to look at as assessment criteria for whether or not to reapprove a program based on their prior performance.
Given that we're sort of into the first round of reapprovals, Sarah could speak to this better than I, but my impression is we're not quite sure where we are.
Mm-hmm.
We have a whole set of criteria that we go by that are relatively new and untried, other than for first-time approvals. So I think, you know, we might give it a little time and certainly come back to that. Okay, seeing no other discussion, we can move on to dental assisting licensing statistics.
The licensure statistics for the dental assisting program are included in your board meeting packets. Once again, we've pulled differing data than we pulled from the last meeting, and we are continuing to work with the Breeze reporting team to see where these errors are coming from. So we've done our best to try to identify trends. There's tables and graphs included in your board meeting packet. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have in relation to the licensing statistics.
Yes, Ann.
Okay, Sarah, I was just wondering if we could gather data from previous years regarding the RDA delinquencies. Looking at the numbers, it seems to be that there are a lot of delinquencies regarding the RDA licensures. I did the math, and it's approximately 25% of the total population. So when I think of that, it's 1 out of 4 RDAs that are out there in the field. And I just was wondering what process is done to either notify the RDA to fix the issue that they're having because they're delinquent at the time, or are they notified several times, or if we could do something regarding posting something on the website, because I feel like that's a high number of delinquencies and that we should try to decrease that number.
Well, renewal notices are sent out approximately 3 months before the renewal expiration date. If we don't receive the renewal notice, then they are given a delinquency notice. I believe it goes out twice following the next 60 days after the renewal date has expired. Licensees have the opportunity to, within the 30-day period following the expiration of their renewal, to pay the renewal fee without a delinquency fee being assessed. After 30 days, they are given a delinquency fee. The problem with the RDA population that we're encountering is that a lot of them choose to not renew and they don't want to pursue continuing to renew their license. But also a lot of them move and fail to report their address change to the board. And so it's very difficult for us to be able to track them down because we have their address of record, which typically is their place of residence, whereas with the dentist, their place of record is their practice, which rarely moves. So it is something that we're looking into to see what we can do to mitigate these numbers. Unfortunately, without the licensing population reporting their address changes to us, it's very difficult for us to track them down.
I wanted just to add, before we get to you, Ms. King, all boards within DCA, our numbers are no higher than their delinquency rates too. So, I mean, I'm not sure it's necessarily that critical that we spend a lot of time looking at perhaps why they're delinquent. Personal responsibility, and it's the responsibility of the dentist who is hiring these people to ensure that they have active licenses. I can say that what contributes to the delinquency could be a lot of things, and they are given notice. I think there's at least one notice sent out after the renewal that reminds them that their license is delinquent. So it's a process that is observed across DCA. But I can assure you that our the delinquency rate of the RDAs is similar to other boards that have a similar type of professional category.
Okay.
Okay.
I also was doing the numbers on the RDA EFs. That was around 14%, which is of course lower than 25%. The OAs were even lower, 8%. But the DSA, the 10 out of 39, that's a 26% margin. That was also higher. I was just thinking, is there a trend that's going on where either they decide not to renew, or is there something that we could do just to show that there are not a lot of RDAs practicing delinquent? You know, I just want to make sure that more doctors are aware of checking for their RDAs and their licensures, just to make sure that all their RDAs are practicing current and active, because I know things could fall through the cracks in the dental office. It gets really busy, but it would be great if the dentists are a little bit more aware of checking their RDAs, just making sure that they're current and active. And if that is done, I feel that the delinquency ratio will decrease and we'll get more RDAs back on track with having their licenses current and active.
I know government is kind of slow on technology, but have we looked at texting? We have automated texting in my office, and it makes a huge difference. I know it's thinking out of the box.
Ms. King, we just got the authority to get the email addresses. We don't have any authority to do the texting. I suppose we could try to get that.
Well, people's phone numbers don't seem to change as often as their addresses or even their emails, and people keep their cell phones. If you want any suggestions on that, we have a pretty nice system we use.
Well, we would need to get the statutory authority to be able to do that, correct?
I was guessing.
I know.
That's a project.
I know that's a huge
I know, you can't
resource
even,
issue.
you can't even get a Dropbox.
Aside from the
so-
huge resource issue.
Yeah, we would have to look into
Okay.
where to even begin with that.
Okay.
I just thought, if government ever moves a little faster, it would be a way that you'd get notices out probably very successfully. It's
Abigail, do you
cheaper.
have a comment? Oh.
No, my question, we do get the emails for RDAs and
We are
we
do
are
collect
getting
emails.
those.
And
I think that's a
then
good test.
They're notified, and I can look more into this, but when they register with the Breeze system, they're getting email alerts and updates on their Breeze accounts as well. So, and we're working to download all of that data so that we can send them out in our email distributions to interested parties separately from what the communications we have with the licensees.
I think maybe another thing we could do is do a better explanation of the active versus inactive. It seems like there's some confusion with some of them. Maybe they're not practicing as an RDA, so they get the notice, they think, well, whatever, I'm not doing that right now, and they're not understanding that they could just place it as an inactive, and then we wouldn't see them on this delinquent list, and they don't have to pay, so that's the other or they don't have to do their CEs. They
Right.
do have to pay, but they don't do
Right.
their CEs. So that might make it a little bit easier for some of them. We may vet some of it out, but there's not a lot of explanation on what that means or how it works.
Right.
I agree, because we see that often in licensing, and where they think that they're not going to be able to use, or they leave the state, they come, and then for some reason or another, they come back. Now, I don't know how much of a percentage that is, but if in fact that there was a sort of education or something that they would get that talks about the consequences if you change your mind, or if in fact you're inactive, that they can continue to pay. We need to kind of break that out. But I think that that's just a matter of informing, and I know that this is a lot, but
Well, I think, yes, it's a matter of informing. I think also, I believe at the February meeting, the board reviewed the statute relating to the issuance of a new license to replace a canceled license, and whether or not an applicant who had a canceled license after having 5 years of delinquency could have the choice to either petition the board and have it go to the board meeting, or that they could just reapply for licensure. So I think having that option available once we get the statutory changes in place, I think that would also aid in this. But I think there is misconceptions out there about the inactive status and what that means, and that it's not just a one-time renewal into an inactive status, that you need to still keep it up biennially and pay your renewal fee. There isn't a, I guess, sabbatical type license category right now, so.
We should also mention that once a license is delinquent for 5 years, it automatically gets canceled. So I don't know, do we have the ability in Breeze to go through our delinquent licenses to know how many are at the 5-year level, how many are at the 4-year level? See, our report is a snapshot in time.
Right.
So essentially, depending on when we ran this report, somebody just may not have paid their license up and then paid it the day after this report. So,
So that is something that I've been working with staff on, trying to pull that data so that we had kind of a trend of, or an aging, if you will, of, those that are delinquent for 0 to 30 days, because, you could tell most likely they're just late in their payment, they're going to get to it. And then trying to do an anticipated outreach as a result of that. The way our system is developed right now, it's continually being redeveloped. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get somewhere with that data soon. That would help us with this.
and to get a tighter look at this too, in a number of boards, when a license has been delinquent for 4 or 4.5 years, they try to notify the person and let them know. If your license is delinquent for over 5 years, essentially it's canceled, you'll have to reapply. So notification is periodically sent out. Now, we've had our issues with staff resources to be able to stay on top of some of these things, but this is an option that we have. But I would reiterate, I don't think that 11,000 delinquent licenses is anything to really put the red flag up about. Okay.
I just have a comment that a lot of times the economics of an RDA and a DA, right now the salaries are pretty comparable. And so a lot of the RDAs are finding reason why they should renew their license and why they should go take classes, because it's very unlikely that a dentist will, if they're used to that assistant for so many years, will not, relieve them. And I think in San Francisco, we have an issue with that they don't mind that they're not RDA as long as they can perform their duties. And so, and the salaries do reflect there's not much difference to be registered or not. And I don't know if the economics is part of that. So I think because I guess the assistant counsel, everybody's been, you're all educators. What can we do to give value to RDA?
Very true.
Can I ask, though,
that sort of surprises me, because I thought that there was a great difference in DA salaries and RDA salaries. And that may factor into why people are inactive or delinquent, and that's an individual decision. I know I've heard a lot of people in Sacramento say that it's not worth the additional cost that it takes to become registered. That they would rather operate in, and I don't know that we can do anything about that part. And that studying it brings us to any conclusions. It just.
I
I'm surprised with your comment, Ross, only because I can only look at this through my filters. And in my practice, I have both an RDA and a DA, and there's a fairly significant difference. And so I don't know what happens outside of my office, but at least in my world, I think we try to provide incentives for people to go up that ladder and to have a career mobility. And between the DA and the RDA, that's certainly part of that issue, and that's the way it works, at least in my world.
I think a lot of the issue, and kind of, going with Dr. Lai, is that there are a lot of dentists who are allowing DAs to do RDA functions, and that's really what it comes down to. And even, I just recently hired an RDA, and I told her she couldn't do sealants because she didn't have a sealants license, and she was shocked. She was like, "What do you mean? I did them all the time in my other office." Well, you can't here because you don't have a license. So I think that's the biggest issue, is that, and that's also why a lot of assistants aren't promoting to that RDA level, is because, well, I get to do everything anyway, it's gonna cost me more money to become a registered dental assistant. So I hate saying it, but I think a lot of it lies within the dentists who own the practice. And I mean, I think it's wonderful to hear that you promote that, level, and, your RDAs to become, or DAs to become RDAs, but it's not the case in a lot of offices out there. And I think that's a big part of our problem.
I've seen both aspects, being in chairside and being in the field of education. It just depends on, of course, the doctor and ethically. Regarding assistants being DAs and RDAs, we always try to advocate all the DAs to become RDAs, because eventually that doctor that they're working for will retire, and that DA is going to go out there to look for a job, and they're not going to get the same salary that they were getting at their doctor that they've been working for 15, 20 years. So they hit that glass ceiling. And once they hit that glass ceiling, they turn around and they wake up and they go back to school, they get their RDA, and to them that becomes their golden ticket of going to another office to be compensated a little bit more higher, so that they could, of course, do the duties that they can do as an RDA and be compensated. So I feel, bottom line, we should always advocate everybody to go to school, and the doctor should also be aware to pay the assistants for what they could do legally in an office, instead of just paying them because they've been there for their loyalty, or, just because they're used to the dentist, to the dentist and the assistant working together. So hopefully we could start moving forward and getting, advocating people to get their licenses and to practice being an RDA in an office legally.
Okay, again, in the interest of time, unless we have new information, I'd like to move this along.
You know what, I think we're stepping outside somewhat of our boundaries here, but I do want to find out who handles that, because it's driven by the marketplace. All of this is, being an RDA and being a DA is driven by the marketplace. Who is actually responsible for determining all of this? Or do we have information? Who is gathering this information? Because we here are now making a lot of assumptions, and we're making assumptions that we may not have the answers to move forward to, solve some of these issues. So RDA delinquency, and maybe the number isn't big enough for us to raise a red flag. I don't know, but that's all I have to add.
Okay, public comment?
Hi, I'm Susie with Dental Specialties, and being an educator, and is it on? being an educator, I deal with the students who are on the job train. And I see a big issue with a lot of students' job there is being dangled in front of their face. Because if the doctor would say to them, well, I'm overseeing what you're doing, you do it. And so a lot of the students are coming to take classes just for themselves, just to be better, but they're also worried about their job. And so a lot of doctors are, I know, I see it all the time with all of my classes, and they are letting them do sealants, they're letting them pack cord, they're letting them, take x-rays when they're licensed, and the doctors also don't think it's a big deal because what they're telling the students is, the assistants is, oh, I'm placing it, but the doctor's pressing the button. That's not happening, but that's what they're verbalizing. So I truly, truly see that there's a problem out there as far as where does it start? It's the employer. And I think if the employer sets the tone about what the staff is legally able to do, well, then that kind of sets the standard. But if not, it's never going to change. And there's no way to monitor it, really, because it's in-house, unless somebody comes in or turns the office in for somebody else doing something that they're not legally able to do. But I know it's an issue right now, and I wish it could be changed. I think it needs to be at the office manager or also the employer working together, also verifying online, are they active licensed RDAs or not? So I really feel there's a concern for the public too, because they're trusting whoever's in the office to do what they're licensed to do. They don't know what they're supposed to do or not. They're trusting in those staff members, and if they're ethically they're not doing that, then that's not good for the public. That's just my thought.
Dr. Atchison.
Guy Atchison, General Dentist, Rancho Cordova. I've had two, this is probably a very small part of this, but I had an orthodontic assistant and an RDA-EF. Both approached me with confusion about whether they should renew their RDA license when they have this additional license. And so there's some problem on their part, whether they need to carry two licenses, they not pay the basic RDA. So there's a communication issue on that also that's probably a small but part of this. Thank you.
It'll be really quick. I just wanted to make sure that we address in future items, because that is a red flag that you just mentioned, a huge red flag. And that's something that we have to really look into, especially with our dentists and how they're operating.
Cara.
I would just like to agree with that, because I have an RDA which says corona polishing, ultrasonic scaling, and sealants on it, and then my RDH has local anesthesia, soft tissue curettage, and nitrous, but my RDHEF doesn't have that on it, so I have to renew my RDA, my RDH, and my RDHEF. So that would be a question for the same question. There's not a lot of RDHEFs, but there's a lot of RDAEFs.
Okay, seeing no other comments on this item, let's move.
Can I just add one more minute? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, but because those fees will be part of what we're increasing, it would be good to let them know early, especially if they have to purchase 2 or 3 licenses.
I don't believe that's a new issue, and I do think there are some things on the website, but it takes a little effort to find it. Okay, let's move ahead to item number 6, discussion and possible action regarding AB 1707.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Allison Veramontes. I am the new legislative and regulatory analyst for the board. Right now, Jerry is passing out a couple documents that were not included in your materials. It is a memo letter regarding the update and status of AB 1707, as well as a letter that our executive officer sent to Governor Brown and the actual enacted bill that was signed into, that was approved by Governor Brown on August 7th.
For those of you who haven't met Allison, she's our new ledge analyst, and we're very glad to have her here.
Thank you. Included in your materials inside the binder was a brief legislative analysis and the original or amended bill for AB 1707. I believe the enacted bill is the exact same one, but just enacted. If you guys want a second or two to look over the documents, I can give you that, if that would be helpful.
Given the bill has been enacted, I don't think we need to take any action on this item, so it's purely to let everybody know.
Just give me a little brief. So this bill is an urgency bill. It extends the suspension date of the practical examination for registered dental assistants until January 1st, 2020, or in the alternative, until the board determines a different way to measure competency, whichever occurs first. As such, as of August 7th, as I said, the bill was signed by Governor Brown, effective immediately. And as such, the board has resumed processing licenses as of that date. This information has been posted on the board's website and sent as an email blast to interested parties. If there's any questions.
Hopefully, we've all seen quite a bit of email activity on this. I thought it was really good news. A lot went into that, believe me.
So just a little follow-up to that. There was some question, of course, the board staff had to stop issuing licenses as of July 1st. So within the last month, actually, we didn't receive a lot of complaints. We didn't appear to receive.
There were some concerned dentists, but I mean, I'd say not a concerning amount. I think for the most part, the message had been clearly communicated. The educators seemed to be aware of the situation. I talked a lot with the leaders of several of the stakeholder associations. So for the most part, the message had been clearly communicated. People, of course, were concerned about the process. We, of course, continued accepting applications, processing applications, and issuing eligibility so that those candidates could go ahead and still take the law and ethics and the written examinations. Since the bill became effective on Monday, staff was prepared. We've already pulled a report of candidates who have already successfully passed both written examinations, and they're proceeding with the issuance of the licensing. We're also doing special projects to continue the cleanup of our file room to make sure that there's nobody that could be potentially missed, and then also responding to phone calls and emails. Of course, with the enactment of the bill, I would anticipate that we're going to have an increase in the telephone and email volume, so we have posted that it could be 4 to 5 days before they get a response from staff. Thankfully, staff have been pretty quick about the responses and able to accommodate the candidates as quickly as possible. So we are up and running. Staff is actively working on processing those applications. We ask that anybody who submitted an application previously does not need to reapply. If they have any questions, they're more than welcome to contact the board, and we'll handle helping them along the way. And of course, new applicants are welcome to continue submitting their applications so that we can continue those processing.
So obviously, there's a backlog.
Yes,
Or, I mean,
yes and no. I'm confident that we're going to be able to get it caught up within the next few weeks. Staff are working diligently. We had a contingency plan in place for the moment that the bill was signed. So as soon as it was signed, we met with all licensing staff. They were made aware. There are specific people assigned to just getting caught up over the last month and making sure all of those people that meet those requirements are getting licensed. Speaking with staff, they're hopeful that will be completed within 3 weeks. And then the file room project is, of course, ongoing. So we're going to continue abandoning applications that should have been abandoned a long time ago, and then updating the files to make sure that those people that are qualified to be licensed do get licensed.
excellent, thank you.
So the people that were, the candidates that were supposed to retake the practical, they got immediately passed?
Well, after the board met in April, board staff immediately started going through those files. We pulled reports based on the candidates that had passed the 2 written exams and whose applications were not deemed to should be abandoned. So those people were already licensed and taken care of prior to the suspension on July 1st.
Okay, thank you.
Since Assemblymember Lowe is my assembly member for my district, I would like to make sure we thank him personally, and so I just want to recognize that here, that he carried this bill.
I think it's very appropriate for him to be recognized here. I've also had a personal conversation with him, thanking him, and when our schedules can work out, he and I are actually going to meet. He's offered assistance in any other things that we may be having coming down the line, so, yes.
His father is an optometrist, so I think he has more than normal interest in the medical field, so that's good.
Okay.
Being that this bill was passed August 7th going forward. Sorry. Being that this bill was passed August 7th going forward, that we're going to license the students that have passed the written, what about going backwards? The ones that did not pass the RDA practical, are they going to be licensed as well?
As long as their application is not deemed to should have been abandoned, then yes. It's on a case-by-case basis. So if they don't meet the requirements in their application should have been abandoned, meaning that they failed to retake an examination that they failed within 2 years, then in those instances, they would have to reapply. But again, we have pulled lists out of Breeze. In the event that those lists are not accurate, 100% accurate, we're also going through file by file through the entire file room and licensing anybody who is eligible as of today's date. In addition to that, if any candidates have questions as to whether or not they're eligible for licensure, we definitely encourage them to send an email. If they've recently passed the law and ethics and the written exams and they're questioning what's going on, definitely send us an email too. It can't hurt to have as much communication as possible to ensure that we've got all avenues covered.
Sarah, to lighten the load, there are people that will go to the website. Do we have an FAQ on the website that will give various scenarios? Because if individuals are going to call the office and just bombard the office with questions, do we have that website that they can go
The
to?
application requirements are posted on the board's website, as well as all of these alerts that we've been posting since the April board meeting, so.
Right, but any anticipated questions that can be answered on the website, like an FAQ?
We continue to add to that, and then staff also have FAQs, and they have pre-approved blurbs or responses to help expedite the email responses as well, so that it's a consistent message that's being shared.
Good.
For the most part, though, I've found that most of the candidates that are applying are more than aware of what's going on, and they're checking on the status, which is helpful. So.
Okay, seeing no other comments, we'd like to move along to agenda item 7, discussion and possible action regarding alternative method to measure RDA competency for licensure as presented by OPES. So if our OPES representatives could come forward and brief us on their report.
Do you have a PowerPoint, Heidi? Okay. So give us a minute here to set up this PowerPoint. So we have Dr. Montez and Dr. Linzer here today, and they're going to be giving a presentation to go along with the agenda item that's in your packet. So if you'll bear with us for a minute, we're going to get the PowerPoint going.
Karen, do we need to move those of us that are sitting at this table so that
I think that would be good, and maybe this is a good time to take like a 5-minute bio Great, if you need one. Bio break?
A bio break. Okay.
Good morning, members of the Dental Board and the Dental Assisting Council. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm Heidi Linser. I'm the Chief of the Office of Professional Examination Services. I have here with me Tracy Montez, the Chief of Division of Programs and Policy Review at DCA. So, you know, I've been giving you presentations for the last few years talking about your RDA practical exam. So I feel very at home here, so thank you for having me back again. Just to remind you or the audience members about what the purpose is of OPES, our mission is to protect the interests of consumers by supporting DCA and its regulatory entities in their commitment to establish and maintain licensure examination programs that are fair, valid, and legally defensible. So a lot of the times when I come and talk to you, I tell you things that maybe aren't popular and aren't always the things that you want to hear, but our job is to remain neutral and protect consumers and make sure that we follow psychometric standards and guidelines so the advice and the recommendations that we give you are based on that public protection and psychometric standards and guidelines. So today, you have in your packet a very long memo that we wrote at your request asking us to consider alternatives other than the RDA practical examination. So I hope you had a chance to review that, and I know it's long and it's a little complex, so we've tried to summarize the most important points so that we can have a good discussion. Go back. So overview of what we're going to talk about. No, back. Overview, okay. So we're just going to give a brief history of all the issues that have happened with regard to the RDA practical exam, a review of the RDA practical exam itself, of what the reviews that OPS has done, and also talk about what was in the memo was a nice summary of RDA requirements nationally. From that, so you can have background context to see what do other states do, and also OPS recommendations for how we think the board should proceed moving forward, and the current focus for this particular board meeting, what we want the board members to focus on, decisions to be made, and the next steps. So, brief history relating to the practical exam. In 2014, the scoring of the practical exam was revised. More dentists were brought into the process that had previously been developed and managed mostly by RDAs, and there were issues with the passing rate at that point. It fell below previous levels. In 2015, the board held stakeholder meetings to address industry concerns with the examination and the revised scoring. The scoring criteria and the passing rate for the examination continued to be an area of concern. In 2015, AB 179 mandated that the board have OPES review the examination, determine whether a practical examination is necessary to demonstrate competency of RDAs, and if so, how this examination should be developed and administered. AB 179 also provided that the board could suspend the exam if OPS determined that it was unnecessary or did not accurately measure RDA competency. So following that, OPES first completed an occupational analysis in 2016 of the RDA profession and the RDA EF, and determined that the RDA clinical skills need to be addressed, but not necessarily through a practical examination. Then in 2017, OPES conducted a review and evaluation of the practical examination, and we identified serious problems. The board voted to suspend the practical, and most recently, AB 1707 extended the suspension date from July 2017 till July 2020. So, review of OPES, review of the practical. As you probably recall, there were many issues, starting with current and historical issues, defining what is minimally acceptable competence. One big issue related to that is the use of the typodont for the examination. It's not the same as working on a live patient. Other problems identified were with the standardization of the testing environments, the materials, the examiner training, calibration, and a lot of difference in dentist and RDA score expectations, as we've had a lot of discussions at this meeting with the instructors and educators saying, we don't know what you're looking for in the exam, and the people developing the exam saying, well, it's very clear, here's the criteria. So we had a lot of discussion on that, and these are indications of a problem with an examination process. Other issues with the practical, as I said, one point is that RDAs practice under supervision in the real world, or they're supposed to practice under supervision, and some of the skills that they are required to do, they master after licensure. Our OA process determined that they acquire some of the basic skills, but those skills are refined and fully mastered after licensure. And that creates a problem, again, with determining what is minimally acceptable competence. It becomes more difficult to define minimally acceptable competence when the skills that you learn improve with practice and experience over time. So what level are we measuring at the exam? And also when the skills are learned in a different mode than actual practice, when they're learned in school and when they're tested on a typodont, but in the real world they're going to be doing it on a patient. So that compounded by the fact that in practice there are a lot of different materials that are used in dental offices, and that people may be testing on different materials than they will actually be using in practice. So those were a lot of the issues that we identified. Also, the major cost in resources to develop and maintain the examination, the practical examination, the way it needs to be maintained if we were to continue it. It would cost a minimum of $220,000 for OPS to develop a new practical examination, and that's just to start. There would be ongoing oversight and maintenance required, as well as ongoing staff time from the board. So in summary, there have been ongoing issues with the RDA practical examination, from defining what is to be measured, how to measure it, who should be evaluating candidates, what equipment and materials should be used. All these factors indicate that a practical examination may not be the most appropriate assessment tool for this profession. In addition, when California's RDA licensing requirements are viewed in light of other states' requirements, a practical examination could be viewed as an unnecessary barrier to licensure. So when 48 states, in our review, we reviewed other states' requirements, and 48 states do not use a practical examination. It's difficult to say that it's necessary for public protection. We don't see any evidence of increased public harm in other states that don't have a practical examination. In fact, 17 states don't license RDAs at all. And not that we're saying that we need to follow exactly what other states do, but this is just information and background for the board to understand, what goes on in other states. And I don't know that we are seeing that there's a big problem with RDAs not functioning as they should be functioning. Most states use either certification by the supervising dentist to determine that RDAs have the required skills, or approved coursework, or a combination of these components. So OPS recommendations to the board today are to include dentist certification of RDA skills as part of the licensure process. That we believe would be sufficient to take the place of a practical examination. And this is supported by the 2016 occupational analysis results, where the SMEs told us that most RDAs refine their skills by working in the dentist office. They learn from the dentist, they learn from the other RDAs and the EFs in the office. And it's also consistent with RDA licensure requirements in other states. This recommendation is also supported by current statute. Business and Professions Code, Section 1750 and 1752 state that the supervising dentist is responsible for determining the competency of RDAs and for determining whether each procedure performed by an RDA should be performed under general or direct supervision. So in addition to a dentist certification of skills, we also believe the board should include completion of specified coursework or certified programs. As a future consideration, the board, we think, should review the types of coursework it considers acceptable for eligibility and to discuss accepting additional training such as the Danby certification programs. We should also include the combined law and general practice examination that we are working on providing that for the board. And that's an important step towards streamlining the licensing requirements by combining those two exams to minimize the hurdles that people need to go to become RDAs and eliminate barriers to licensure. And eliminating the practical exam component would also improve reciprocity with other states and maybe assist with shortages of RDAs that we are concerned about. And we believe the board should maintain the work experience pathway to licensure as well. So for today, I know I've given you a lot of information, a lot of things to think about. Today, the board should just focus on determining whether to eliminate the practical examination requirement, and if so, initiate the process to define how dentist certification, coursework, and state examinations will be used as a basis for RDA licensure. So we think the next step would be for the board to create a subcommittee to develop the details of the eligibility and licensure requirements. So they would work on procedures, a checklist for the dentist certification to make that a smooth and consistent process, and review the coursework and existing RDA certification educational programs and see if those need to be reviewed and changed and analyzed. So that's my presentation for today. Is there questions?
Are there any questions from board members?
Looking at other states, is the scope of practice the same for an RDA in California as it is for a, I think they are titled differently in other states. So is the scope of practice the same?
There's a lot of overlap. There is some variability. There's a lot of overlap between RDA, what we have at RDA and RDA EF. Some states, there's just one where they do the EF functions and the RDA functions. There's variability, but at the same time, there's a lot of consistency. And we can give that information. We have a lot of detailed information on what other states do. We can make that available to the board.
I know I would like to see that. If we're going to be looking at, what other states do, and it seems like a lot of your reporting is based on what other states do. I would really like to see that information. That's okay to ask for?
Yes.
Dr. Morrow.
I want to thank you for your detailed and comprehensive report. It was one of my more important reads in this otherwise voluminous binder that we get. I enjoyed it very much, but then I am in the education business. I think your points are well stated and they're well supported. Obviously, the major questions that I have are, the devil is in the details. And certainly all the details need to be worked out. But I think what you have described as an acceptable or recommended alternative to a practical examination makes sense. And I think it is consistent with the educational process in dentistry at the present time. Basically, our students go through a foundational knowledge portion of their education, which is obtained by lectures, seminars, reading assignments, etc. And then they go into a foundational skills process, which is laboratories, preclinical laboratories, and that type of thing. And then they go into the process of competency, development of clinical competencies, which is a process. That's heavily supervised, obviously, by the dentist. And your description of a process of education plus practical training, with the dentist being the responsible person to assess whether or not they have met that level of competency that allows them to begin or to enter the practice of registered dental assistants. That does not mean that 6 months later, a year later, 5 years later, they won't have developed a higher level of skill, but it is a safe level to enter into that. So my concern in that process would be that those dentists that are assessing the level of competency that the student has received, do they have a level playing field? Would you recommend that in that process that we develop assessment factors and assessment criteria, a rubric, you might say, to have the dentist evaluate and submit that along with the recommendation to the board that they be licensed?
Yes, we do want to streamline this, but we still, again, want to tie it back to the occupational analysis. We want to use subject matter experts. So we would envision an affidavit such that it has those 3 specific skills that were identified in the occupational analysis with some sort of rubric or grading criteria that the dentist would basically say yes or no, and then that would be submitted. So yes, it would all fall within our validation methodology to support that and give the dentist some guidance. But again, we're going to stay away from calling it a test, more of a certification or affidavit. But again, we don't want to put additional stress or demands on the dentist. We want to make sure it's very clear, streamlined, uniform, and again, always involving our subject matter experts in the process.
Thank you.
Just maybe you could help me if I could clarify this a little bit. What we're really looking for here is the board to approve moving forward with developing an exam alternative that would include the dentist certification process. That process still needs to be worked out, as I understand it. So that they're asking for our assistance in the form of a subcommittee or something to work on that. But it's just, I think what we want to do is make a decision that we're not going to continue to move toward any kind of RDA practical or other exam model. So that's really kind of the decision before us now.
Yes, and if I may add on, I would
Yes.
just say yes, that is exactly what we want to do, because although we have this extension that the bill has given us, we would like to move as quickly as we can to get that alternative in place. So by telling us, no, the practical's out, then we can focus all of our resources on getting you information to craft this out, which would come at later meetings. Thank you.
With that said,
Yeah, I'll let, yeah.
that the board accept the recommendations that we have been presented to by the Office of Professional Assessment Services, and we move in the direction of eliminating the practical examination and developing a hybrid, you might say, examination where courses and clinical competency would be assessed by the practicing dentist.
Just one
Not on,
one
right.
clarification.
No, wait a
We
minute,
wouldn't be
wait, wait,
calling
wait.
it an examination. It would be an assessment of competency or
Yes, an
something to that
assessment of
effect.
competency, or they would be assessed as being competent to enter the practice of dental assisting.
With that, I'd like to second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, Dr. Morrow and Ms. Burton. Now we can continue with discussion. I'll just go around the table if that's okay with you.
That works. Okay, so the dentist certification piece of it, I would just like to express some concerns, because this potentially could be my last meeting, so I want to have my voice be heard. With that, I just feel like the dental assistant potentially could be held hostage by the dentist at getting their RDA, because if they're not signing them off, maybe they don't want them to get their RDA because they don't want to pay them more. There's just a lot of reasons why this could not go well. maybe it's just not important to the dentist, so they're going to just keep pushing them off. So the dental assistant's chasing them around, trying to get them to sign off on these competencies or whatever it is. They're too busy. It's not important. There's so many different reasons. I have grave concerns that the dental assistant is reliant on the dentist to sign this and to put it through for them to become licensed. I think it should be between the state, the dental assistant and the state, and leave the dentist out of it.
The two words coursework, can you give me a little help in trying to understand who would develop, is there a context, or who develops the coursework, and how does that process work? Because to me, it seems like that's going to be a huge part of this process.
Well, we deal directly more so with the examination components, but we would be working on the similar courses that you already have in place, the programs and things like that, and then that committee would deal with any changes to proposed coursework. Sarah might be able to address that a little bit better, but again, working on the requirements that you already have in place and maybe making some modifications or additions. For example, you have to take your infection control courses, your various things like that.
So the subcommittee would be working with OPES to develop that curriculum, and so forth?
Yvette, you had a comment? Okay. Ann, did you have anything?
My question is, would the dentist be willing to do this in addition to their duties in the office? And how would they all be calibrated?
Well, we hope that they would, since we've heard that there's a shortage and there's concerns about the practical exam and the deficiencies. As far as being calibrated, again, they would be given a rubric, but this isn't a test where we all need to bring them in and calibrate them as a group, but they would given some basic information about what entry level is. And again, it's a yes or no. It's a judgment call that they are making, because again, ultimately they make that judgment every day in terms of general or direct supervision. So.
And we will be able to look at what other states, remember, most other states use this model, and we can get materials from other states to see how their process works as far as the dentist certification.
I had another question. The other states that have, the RDAs or CDAs, are there just DAs in that state as well, or are there just CDAs in that state? Here we have DAs and RDAs. I was just wondering.
Every state is a little different. There's a lot of variation. And remember, there's 17 states that don't license RDAs at all, so they're all basically DAs in those states.
I'd like to bring up too, all these states do it, but you don't have much feedback on how well that's working. I run what was a very small office, and not dental, but another office. To add one more thing that I would have on my plate would, in small offices, I think whoever heads it does like 15 different jobs. So I go along with Judith's concerns about heading that way without having more data on how well it works in other states. If we had followed that with our new dental approach, our portfolio, we wouldn't have portfolio because nobody used it in any other state, and now everybody is talking to us about using it in their states. So I'm a little concerned about the idea that because other states do it, it's a good way for California to go.
And I want to be clear, too, that, again, we're not saying because other states don't do it, California should do it. It's just contextual information so that you know that there is not a concern with patient harm out there in other states. They do not have a need to license RDAs. or to have practical examinations because there has not been patient harm. And I want to gently remind the board that the Little Hoover Commission is looking very carefully at license, regulations, certifications, and so forth. And we are trying to be extremely proactive in looking at all of our professions that we regulate at DCA and making sure that we do not have hurdles in place that could be seen as a barrier. So again, we provide you with the information of what other states are doing, but we're not saying do it because they're doing it, because we have some very unique things here in California. But we do feel that your practical exam is extremely problematic and that there needs to be other alternatives. And we heard some conversation, some discussion about the written test and the pass rates. We would love to be able to take some resources and work on that. We've already started doing it, but we'd like to see how we can improve that, how we can update it, and look at ways to improve the pass rates, how we get that information out, and then this other component of an affidavit. Again, trying to simplify it, streamline it, so as not to put a burden on the dentist and the office, but again, still make sure that those skills are considered and evaluated in the licensure process. We think it makes a very nice package for your board. Again, creating more opportunities for RDAs to get licensed and addressing any barriers into licensure and showing a very proactive approach. And again, we don't have specific data because we couldn't find anything. We were doing searches about enforcement issues, concerns, questions. It just doesn't seem to be a problem on the national level.
So I'd like to comment on
Sure,
that.
please.
When you say no harm, I get very concerned because you're not giving us any statistics, any data. You're just saying no harm. And you are asking, or you're suggesting, a direction. And I don't see a lot here except saying that most states that do license do it this way. So I am one to be a little skeptical about that. So that's just my input.
I have another question regarding the DAs that want to be RDAs. If they're not employed by a dentist, how would they go about being tested or evaluated? Where are they going to go?
And that would be something the subcommittee would help us, because again, we'd want to make sure that all the candidates had opportunities.
Okay.
So, let's just take out what other states are doing. Let's just, ignore that piece of information. And again, think about here in California. Okay, we have, through our occupational analysis, shown that there are some skills that need to be considered in the licensure process, but certainly don't necessarily need to be evaluated in the format of a practical. So again, going back to the decision, I think it's appropriate to consider eliminating the practical and looking at other alternatives, whether it's an affidavit or, can't come up with something right now off the top of my head, but something more detailed. We can look into that. But that's, again, really the focus today. Where do you want us to spend our time and resources? Looking at something other than the practical or not?
I just have one comment that I do agree with Judith in that every doctor's a little different. They have different ideas of what they think is competent, what is competency. I don't like the part that there's one person that you have to work with is holding all the cards, and that's difficult for me. He might be a great dentist. He might be a really bad one. So let's just say it only works out for 6 months. Now, after 6 months, maybe they're not qualified to work with somebody else, because they just don't have that ability, but it was good enough for that person. So it's very difficult to say or standardize that. So I can see where the problem for us is that it's hard to get practical going. It costs a lot of money. But we have to have a standard that everybody has to aspire to. Even the educators they have to be able to teach candidates how it's going to be. So they do have to have a standard. So is a standard for that doctor or a group practice? I mean, I don't think it's enough. And that's a problem I have with that.
And I think that what you're describing really goes to the heart of one of the problems we've had with the practical is that minimally acceptable competence, that entry-level standards. It's very, very challenging for your profession because you have the DAs, you have the RDAs, you have the dentists that can provide general or direct supervision. You've got the different pathways. It's extremely challenging to lock that down. But we go back to the fact that you have the Business and Professions Code with regard to the supervision of the dentist, and certainly I think that it's very important feedback that you're sharing about having the RDAs held hostage, because we would not want that kind of situation. There would have to be a mechanism that if they feel that that's happening, that can get addressed.
Well, there's been a motion that has been put on the floor by Dr. Morrow, and I know we're discussing some things now, but are we saying this motion is to accept the recommendations set forth by OPES, but are those details going to be worked out with the subcommittee and our consultants? And at that point, we'll determine if, in fact, will the dentist be signing off. Am I correct? This is a process, but we're just starting the process. Is this correct? Am I correct?
Yes, I think we're starting to do the business that goes beyond the motion. And we have spending valuable time doing committee or subcommittee business in this discussion. So, I think my motion was more one of a concept to move forward with rather than the details of what that will be. That will come back to us at a future time for us to go into more detailed discussion regarding. So it's a conceptual motion rather than a detailed, specific, this is what we're going to do motion. So.
And to add to that, should the board decide today that they want to move forward with a practical examination, today you would need to give a strong rationale as why you would go against the OPE recommendation. Just keep that in mind.
So
We-
can
we
I
have
ask for
about-
the motion again?
Yes.
What was the motion?
You
Somebody write
stated
it down.
The motion is to accept the recommendations set forth by our consultants and OPES.
But it's also written in here that there's an affidavit. I mean, there has a language there. Are we changing any of the language? Because I know that, I agree that we should.
Write everything.
So I'm just curious on what the language would look like.
Okay, the
because if
motion,
we're
this is
approving-
what the motion is. To accept the OPES recommendation to essentially
Eliminate the practical examination requirement and
It's on the
pursue
screen.
an alternative process. And again, I think by keeping the motion general and alternative process, we can bring you back data and hopefully address a number of the concerns that were brought to us, again, working with a subcommittee.
Okay, Dr. Stewart.
I would hope that before we vote on that motion, that's going to be open to the stakeholders that are in the room, because I think the voices we need to hear that we have not heard from are the educators, and I would certainly want to hear their concerns before we make a,
We always take public comment before a vote, Dr. Stewart. Okay, any other board member or DAC member comments? Okay, I'd like to open it up for public comment.
I want to make one more comment.
Oh, yes, please.
Even though I'll keep talking about other states, since that's what my frame of reference is at this point, to give you the board alternatives in that, if you look again at the memo, not every state has the dentist certification. We think it's important. However, other states have just coursework. So that's just something for the board to consider.
Yeah, there are a number of states that just
Right.
accept the Danby Certified Dental Assistant, which is a written exam only. It's a tough one. Okay, public comment. Dr. Atchison.
Yeah, Dr. Guy Atchison, California Academy of General Dentistry. I think I'd like to push this back to the discussion that happened just before the Opus presentation, and that's the concern about the very high variability in pass rates depending on where the students get their education. So you have a tool for the written exams by what their pass and fail rate is. The practical exam is the only tool that I see you have to evaluate the teaching of the manual skills in these programs. And if you eliminate that, I'd like to see some kind of mechanism to evaluate these schools. You mentioned that you're going through your first round of recertification of educational programs. And so what tools do you have to evaluate the quality of that education that these students go through? That's my comment. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Maria, and I am an RDA and an OAP license holder. I work for Dental Specialties Institute, and I teach some of the courses there. I also work for several offices, dental offices who hire their orthodontists to do their orthodontic treatment. And all of the three dentists that I work for have expressed their concerns about the change of the not having the RDAs take the practical. And one of the reasons that they say is that the quality of the education, they say that they don't have time to train the assistants. They say that they want to know that they have a very good quality and high standards of education. They want to pretty much say they want to have trained assistants outside their offices. They also are concerned about how much they should be paying the assistants. They said, one of them said, if I am going to hire an assistant who is not, did not go through the certification practical examination, I'm not going to want to pay her RDA wage. She says that she's going to be looking for assistants who have gotten their licenses prior to this passing. So I'm just relying what they're saying. I think that before you make any decisions of how are you going to, the changes that you're going to be making to make it so that everybody has a very good quality education, that you should consult the dentist and make sure that you know if they're willing to do anything to help, educate the assistants, because it seems to me that 3 out of the 3 that I work are concerned about that and say they will not do any training. So that's my opinion.
Hi, everybody. Claudia Pohl. I am a retired educator, but here for CDAA. I'm not even sure where to start. Oh, there's so many things. First of all, I am really grateful because California has always been a leader in dentistry. And other states in the United States look to California, not just on the dental aspect, but on the dental assisting aspect. We have a broad scope of practice. And we have always had standards that are congruent with that scope of practice. And so to look at the OPES report and see the data from the other states, it's very difficult because dental assisting is very different than hygiene and dentistry in that our scope of practice and our licensure and certifications and whatever you else want to call them are so varied. So it's very hard to compare state to state. And I think it muddies the water. And I hope that we kind of look to the states to see maybe some ideas, but not be driven by that. We have always, California has driven so many things in dentistry, and I don't want to see us go backwards by looking at what other states are doing. And I don't want to see us lower the standards. So our scope of practice is very broad for dental assisting, and the standards need to stay high for the qualifications and licensure for that as well. I would have hoped to have heard more than one alternative today from OPES. So I understand that the practical was problematic. We've been discussing this for years. The existing practical, that doesn't mean the practical needs to, that couldn't be an alternative, right? So, but to be brought one alternative makes it very difficult, I think, to make a good choice. I think we need to be looking at a multitude of alternatives. The REB is an alternative that would replace the existing practical or the former practical. So there are other alternatives. But as long as there is an on-the-job trained component to our pathway to licensure, there has got to be something to assess the clinical skills. And that's been said before. If it's educational only, then we can be looking at portfolio or some of the other pathways to licensure and get away from the clinical exam. But as long as there's on-the-job trained. And so you have to look at, if we're doing dentist certification for skills, right, how's that going to look when you have somebody coming out of an educational program? How's that going to look when you have an OJT? You also have to remember that you have an OJT that could end up being an RDAEF, right? So do you have those assessments and the standardization and all that stuff to make sure that they're qualified when they get to the end on the other side? Am I making sense? A couple of things. As far as patient harm, that was one thing that was raised. We all know that sometimes there's patient harm that, number one, the patient is not aware of, right? And sometimes they might be aware of it the next day, like, oh, I'm a little sore here. I wonder what happened, right? Well, maybe it was that matrix band that got shoved in the sulcus, right? Or maybe it was the rubber dam clamp, or the tongue that wasn't retracted well and the burr hit the tongue. So we know that many times there is patient harm that happens in the patient's mouth that isn't noted, discussed, or reported. And so I think that makes it really difficult to quantify whether patient harm has happened or not. And I would just remind the board that your mandate is to protect the public. And in one of the earlier OPES reports, it was stated that the practical was needed to protect the patient, right? And now that has changed, and so I have questions, but anyway, that's it, I think, for now.
Good morning. Alan Felsenfeld, speaking as a full-time educator at UCLA and as someone who actually spent a good chunk of my life in the development of portfolio from the outset. I listened to this today and I'm thinking about what's gone on in dentistry in California. Now, I do understand clearly that a dentist practices 100% independently and an RDA does not, but can do things with general supervision. I get that. And I don't use RDAs, I'm an oral surgeon. But that being said, I'm looking at this and I don't understand the absolute need for a rush decision on this today. OPS says we have to do it now in a hurry up. I get the point that we've just stopped doing the practical exam and that the low bills seem to create elation amongst members of the board because it seems to give us a breathing room and deal with the fact that the exam has not been good. I understand all that. But I'm also hearing a whole series of different discussions by all of you here and some of our members in the audience who say, well, this question's got to be answered, this question's got to be answered, and this question's got to be answered. And I agree, there are a lot of questions. Portfolio did not come up one day, and we decided to do it, and we eliminated the need for another exam and said, here, you can have it. It's an alternative method of licensure. We may still want to keep an exam. Some of the people are saying we should, and that's fine, and the exam needs to be cleaned up. But we may want alternate ways to license ourselves or license our DAs or RDAs. We have now about 5 or 6 different ways a dentist can come into this state. Back in 1970-something, we only had one way. there's reasons to have more than one way to do this. But this is backwards, to decide whether to eliminate the practical exam requirement. So the motion, as I get it, is you want to eliminate that today, and then do a committee to study what else you can do. And if that committee comes up with nothing, then you have nothing other than the written exam, which may be okay, and that's what Lowe is doing with us now for the next 3 years. But I think it's very important for this board to turn around and sit down, get your committees going, get your public hearings going, whatever you're going to do to figure it out, and get answers to these questions before you throw out the baby with the bathwater. It makes no sense at all to do it that way. I would certainly like to see more study on this. I personally don't think practical exams mean too much. I know that some of the educators will disagree with me, and that's fine. But I think if you can look at the different ways and look at the calibration of the dentists and things that have been raised here today, and what the problems that would be raised with that would be, then I would think at that point you can make a rational decision as to whether or not we should just get rid of the practical completely and go to a different means, or use a different means along with the practical.
Kara Miyazaki, Foothill College. I would like to see that the scope of the subcommittee would be more broad and to include, just to be a little bit more broad and not be so limited to eliminating the practical exam. And one question I have in my mind is maybe the subcommittee could decide whether they should look into if a dentist signs off their RDA, the DA becomes an RDA, they go to another practice, they injure a patient. Now, can that dentist sue the previous dentist who signed off that dentist before? And I think that's sort of the stuff that needs to be vetted out in a subcommittee that can be formed. I also contacted Cindy Durley of the Dental Assisting National Board, and someone had a question about what's done in other states, and actually this is the book that explains what's done in all the other states that can be accessed through the Dental Assisting National Board. They also looked at the memo from the OPES and had some comments that they would like to share, and I've been given permission to share that with the board and OPES and the Dental Assisting Council if that's possible. So it's a long and lengthy memo. I don't want to go into the whole details, but I just wanted to say that they had one clarification to say that the Dental Assisting National Board doesn't give coursework. They actually administer the CDA exam, which has 3 components. There's a infection control component, which is 100 questions. There's a radiation health and safety, which is 100 questions. And there's the general chair side, which is 120 questions. And the Dale Foundation actually offers coursework for review for the exams. Thank you.
Mary McCune with CDA. I don't want to repeat a lot of what's been said, but there are a lot of concerns I see both at the dental board and DAC level and within the audience. I would encourage and respectfully suggest that the committee process that comes from this has a stakeholder process, and we'd be happy to work with the dental board, DAC, and the stakeholders in creating alternative to the practical examination.
Melody Randolph, Sacramento City College. I would just like to ditto what the representatives from CDA have said. I've been involved in coming to the board meetings for many years, and it seems like we work very slowly in most cases and go through a number of steps in order to ensure we're making the right decision. And for some reason on this decision, we are going way too fast. We need to slow down and look at all the alternatives so that we don't end up making a snap decision and regret it down the road. And it's surprising to me how fast and what the hurry is and why we have to hurry up and do this when there's potential patient harm here. In the patient harm, I would hope that we're not waiting an issue. I would hope that we're not waiting until we have the public seriously harmed by work from dental assistants that are not qualified to do the duties that we're letting them do, and then backtrack. Similar to the anesthesia problem we've had in California, now we're backtracking and putting all these things in place because we've had harm. We don't want to wait until there is harm in order to address these issues. We need to keep our standard high to prevent harm. And I'm concerned about the motion, because the motion that was on the floor, if you watch the video back, the motion that's on the floor is stating that we're accepting OPS's recommendation to eliminate the practical, number one, and to accept dentist affidavit. That is the motion. That is what was said.
Well,
Yes, it was.
did you see what was written above?
I agree, I hear you, but what was said, what the doctor's motion was, and what was seconded was to accept the dentist's affidavit. So, okay, so if you're gonna eliminate that, that's great. That's awesome. That's wonderful.
The language was up on the screen? Right. The language was up on the screen. Okay. Is up on the screen, yes. Yep.
Can I ask a question on that, though? How do you have a motion that says decide whether to eliminate? Does that mean decide in the future, or does that mean today to decide? Because it says for today. So I'm a little confused on the motion, too.
Dr. Morrow, will you, as the motioner, would you like to clarify your motion based on what's on the screen?
Excuse me. My motion was to eliminate the current practical exam. And then my second part of my motion was to work with OPS to move in the direction of developing a hybrid or a combination process for RDA licensure that would include coursework and also assessment of assessment of competency by the supervising dentist.
I believe Michael had a comment here.
What I would recommend, because the OPS report is merely recommendation, so the board doesn't have to quote unquote adopt it. And I wouldn't recommend that the board adopt it before a subcommittee was created and you go through and review everything, including the OPS report, but everything else, because there's a whole plethora of information that the board still needs, and you need your subcommittee to filter it. The original motion, as I heard it, did say to eliminate the practical exam and to go forward with the dentist certification. So that's another thing that concerns me as well, is because you're limiting what the board is going to be able to do. What I would recommend is that you merely keep the motion general to say that you want to create a subcommittee to, and we're just going to take it straight from the agenda item or from what we're looking at, is just to develop alternatives for the board to consider to assess the competency of registered dental assistant candidates to perform the clinical procedures necessary for licensure. So that's it. You keep it really open and just say, we want to create the subcommittee, and hey, subcommittee, study this, study all, and you can say all the alternatives, so everything, even including a practical, so that you address the constituency. But I'm just saying that's what I recommend, to keep it open, because if you're going to a conclusion now, but you haven't had your subcommittee, that's usually how the process for subcommittees goes.
Judy?
With that said, is it possible for me to amend my motion, or should I just withdraw it and start all over again? At this point in time, my feeling is that I will just withdraw the motion. Now, somebody else wants to stick their neck out, go ahead.
Can I add something, if I may? I need to disrespectfully disagree with legal. I do think part of it, the general part about the subcommittee is appropriate, but I think at this point, the board needs to make a decision about eliminating the practical. We have been dealing with this for 5+ years. The legislature has looked at this twice and passed legislation. Our other boards and bureaus, and again, I'm sorry to be doing comparisons, but they are getting rid of their oral exams, they are getting rid of their practical exams, and they are finding alternative ways to assess candidates, to protect consumers, allow for reciprocity and transportability and reduced barriers. I think that part of the motion, again, I respectfully recommend that that the board make a decision as to whether or not to eliminate the practical examination, and then to have a subcommittee look at alternatives, not necessarily an affidavit, but look at other alternatives, removing the practical, because we have been here at several meetings. We have done several studies for you, giving you enough evidence to show that there are extreme concerns with the practical exam and with costs. Even if you were to do a practical, again, you're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars. You're talking about passing on costs to candidates because you'd have to have them do typodonts. It would be just an incredible burden to this board, and you will still have issues with measuring minimum competency. I don't mean to sound very firm, but again, we have reported to this board numerous times the problems with the practical. So I respectfully ask that you reconsider the motion to eliminate the practical and to then have a subcommittee look at alternatives other than a practical exam. Thank you.
And I am going to move that motion.
Thank you.
The motion is to eliminate the practical exam and have a subcommittee look at alternatives. Clean. And so that's the motion. And then a little editorial. I think the reason why we are here right now is because we, and that's everybody in this room, started to go into the weeds. You know, oh, you're going to do this, and then this is going to happen, and that's going to happen, and that's going to happen, and there has been no subcommittee action. We need to put all of that aside and just look at the motion. The other thing that I'm going to say is I have been on this board since 2009, and I have heard about the pros and cons of a practical exam, the pros and cons of what's going on in dental assisting. And if we keep doing this, we will get to 2020 when the bill says you either do something or we go back to what we have. I promise you, we will get to 2020. So that's my.
So the motion reads to eliminate the practical exam and develop a subcommittee to look at alternative, help me?
To look at alternatives, period.
Okay, great, I have that. Motion moved by Burton and seconded by May.
Okay, we have additional public comment.
Also, can we do that? Because we had a motion on the floor.
He withdrew his motion.
He withdrew it. I think I heard from him about it.
I'm Susie with Dental Specialties, and I appreciate your feedback, and I agree with your motion. My concern is I work with on-the-job trained assistants. So I kind of don't think going and putting more on the doctor's plate to sign off a checklist and have them evaluate them on their skills. Also, I'm thinking that for an alternative is having maybe a different certificate program. Like create something that the board thinks that should be considered testing on, or not testing, but like your certification program, like chronopolishing and pit and fissure and infection control, something like that, and have these objectives within the course that they can be taught and get a certificate. Then when they want to become an RDA, maybe there's a checklist on there that the doctor would sign, yes, I have this, I have that, so that then they'll sign it because they were, went through this appropriate, recommendations that the board approved on what was required. So I'm thinking instead of having the whole practical and the expense with the dental board, then just having providers or schools or whatever do what they're doing and administer that and just have it a checklist on the RDA application. Somewhere on there, like you already have on the front part of it, you have chronopolishing and CPR and, radiation. So then you just add that one more thing on there instead of having the doctor check them off.
I'm Maureen Titus, and I teach at a dental assisting program in Santa Maria. I concur with Claudia. I don't know where to start. There's so many things that have been discussed, so many concerns that have been discussed that I agree with many of these major concerns. In programs now, we are already clinically testing students on patients, practically. We are doing not only the corona polish, we're doing the sealants, we're doing the x-rays. So in my thinking, and whenever your subcommittee gets together, it might be beneficial to have that type of a portfolio situation for the dental assisting programs as well. And that would take out having a dentist be the one to sign off. So you'd have a broader scope of people. We're already giving them certifications for various things. Why not think about adding that? Thank you.
Lisa Okamoto, California dental hygienist. Speaking as a dental professional and as a consumer, my concern is that with respect to OPES, there may be some flaws in their assumptions that led to their recommendations. For instance, it was mentioned that assistants gain most of their skills and refine their skills on the job. I would posit that that's true for all of us. We gain from our experience. Secondly, to say that dentists are already responsible for the dental assistants because they train the DAs, are responsible for verifying their competency, and that for an RDA, the dentist determines whether they're under general or direct supervision. DA skills are very limited, so there's not a lot of potential effect for the consumer and the end product or the service that the consumer receives. And the definition of general and direct supervision in dentistry is not what the average consumer would define as supervision. It's not as if the dentist has to hover over us, whether an assistant or a hygienist, and look over our shoulder verifying what we are doing. It just means whether they are in the office, on the premises, or not in the office. So I don't think those are good basis for, or strong basis for the recommendations made. And lastly, the recommendation for supervising dentist verification. It does not establish a means of a certain standard of competency among those who would therefore get the RDA licensure. If every dentist in California is allowed to supervise and certify, there is no standard, therefore, of skill for that the RDA licensure would denote. Thank you.
Yeah, just to respond generally, I think people are assuming a lot of things that have not really gone into effect yet. We want to look at this, we want to study it, we want to figure out how it's going to work. Then it will come back to the board. So give us a chance to follow our directive. That's all we're asking for here.
Mr. President?
Yes.
I guess I'm not feeling real comfortable in terms of the pace and just the way this thing is moving forward. And I like the idea of a subcommittee, but for us to ask a subcommittee to look at alternatives, except this one, to me seems to be very, it's restricting, it's making a decision ahead of its time, and it's restricting their opportunity to look at all options. And I'm just not comfortable doing that. So I have to respectfully disagree with the motion I think that's on the floor right now. I think that we can keep it cleaner and more simple. Let the subcommittee do its work. Let the subcommittee work. We've already heard that our stakeholders will work with us, and we'll put some of these issues to rest. and hopefully we'll make a better decision. I think we have time to do that, and I think we should take time to do that rather than feel rushed and make a decision.
I agree.
Fran?
If I could respond to that, the motion is to eliminate the practical exam requirement and look at alternatives, period. Alternatives, plural word, period. That's the motion. It's not some specific thing, and it's not some specific thing. That's the motion. I think that we're getting broken, we're breaking down in assuming what it's going to be and assuming what it will include and what it won't include. And I will say to you again, as the person who comes from a legislative background, we have until 2020 to do this. And when I look at the time that I have been on the board and how long it takes to come to some decisions, that's not a lot of time. And I don't think that within that, in 2017, that we are saying make a decision tomorrow, but we have got to move forward on this. We have been dragging our feet on this for so long.
Could we call for a vote?
And I think that everybody, I think that I hear pretty much a general agreement that the practical exam doesn't work. And so this allows us to move from something that doesn't work to some alternatives that will. And so with that, I'd like to call for the question.
Karen asked to make a comment first.
I just wanted to say that there's kind of two issues that are here. So the statute says by 2020, January 1st of 2020, we either have a practical examination or we have an alternative. So in your policy decision today that I've heard in the motion is that the board intends perhaps not to move forward with a practical examination. However, if you don't come up with an alternative, a practical examination will go into effect January 1st of 2020. The second part of that is the problem is we need to start now if you intend to have a practical examination. It will take 2 years to develop a practical examination, and that's where the urgency is. So what you're talking about today is a policy decision that with the information that OPES has given you, they are strongly recommending that you get rid of a practical examination. And if you determine that you're not going to get rid of the practical examination, you need to develop a rationale, preferably today, of why you feel you're not going to follow the OPES recommendation. That's in order to cover yourself for the implications that will come out of that decision with the Little Hoover Commission, who is strongly looking at boards' decisions and whether barriers to licensure are being put in front of certain licensure categories. Okay, so even if you decide today not to have a practical examination by way of policy, you still have time to determine whether or not you've changed your mind along the way. But we will be up against a big push if you at some point decide beyond today to have a practical examination. Does that help, Dr. Stewart, in terms of you feel things are going too fast? 2020 is just around the corner. And it appears quick, but if there's the slightest possibility that you think you would want to somehow develop a rationale to have a practical examination, we need to see, and if OPES would even be available to start the work on what it would take to get a practical examination.
And I would
So,
just like
wait,
to
could I
add
ask
to that
clarification?
2020 is right around the corner, but also within the legislative calendar, in order to have a bill to meet that deadline, we don't really have 3 years.
Yeah, so can I ask a clarification on the motion? So the motion, I think what I heard Karen say is, you can eliminate the practical exam right now, but you could put a task force or a committee together, and if they came back and said they felt that the practical exam was needed, there's still the opening to do that. Is that correct?
Well, it's a limited opening because OPES needs 2 years. 2 years from today is August of 2019. And that would only give us 4 months to implement and to do all the other things, or we stop issuing licenses January 1st of 2020.
So might I add an alternative here? I'd say we have a motion on the floor, and the question has been called. If board members have a strong rationale for continuing to investigate and develop a practical exam, we can take a motion to reconsider at the next meeting, and that'll give you a time to generate that rationale in writing to submit for the board to consider.
So can I ask another clarification on the motion? Did the motion have in it that there would be a task force put together? And if not, would you accept a friendly amendment that adds that there be a task force formed to look at this?
I believe there was a directive to include a subcommittee.
Subcommittee in the motion? It's. That's in the motion. Is it, Fran? Oh, okay, okay.
A subcommittee, not a task force.
Subcommittee, okay.
And I would respectfully disagree with coming back at the next meeting. The time is, the clock is ticking.
Well, I'm saying people, okay.
We took a vote in the summer to eliminate the practical exam. We already took a vote to do that. Unless you want to assume that it was that practical exam and not some other exam, 'cause practical exam, we're getting too much in the weeds here. Let's just make this clean. What we're doing is eliminating the practical exam and looking at a subcommittee, look at alternatives.
Well, I support your motion, so you're not having any argument here. Dr. Lai, quickly now.
The practical exam administered by the state, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, by the board.
Okay, so, but to that, when I read that, that means all practical exams. And I don't know if REP ever comes into that.
There's background information in your report that addresses all the alternatives we're discussing here in detail. Now, we can look at it again, but the information is there for your consideration.
I think Dr. Lyack made a good point. He's asking whether if an alternative comes back to use another testing agency, has the board just voted in the first part to not even consider that because it's a practical examination? I don't think that was the intent. I think the intent was to eliminate a board practical examination. Dr. Montez, is that what we're talking about?
Oh, at this point, I would say all practical examinations.
Okay.
Certainly, the board can choose not to, but again, an outside practical examination is still going to have to follow all psychometric guidelines. Those are national guidelines that we follow. Business and Professions Code Section 139 is based on those psychometric guidelines. They're national and there's federal. And so many of the problems we have discussed with the state board exam, you are going to see even if another vendor comes in and does it. It's just you're going to be paying more for an outside vendor. So please do keep that in mind. Sorry, and another thought. Again, I don't mean to be so hard-nosed, but again, if you come back with a justification, it needs to be a psychometrically sound justification that refutes the work or the recommendation of OPS, because again, we are bound by Business and Professions Code Section 139, National Psychometric Standards. We have had our work scrutinized at the board level, at the legislative level, at the Little Hoover Commission level on other projects, and we've also had to defend our work in an administrative court setting. And so our methodology is very sound. So that's what we would be looking for. If you come back with a justification, it needs to be based on that. And again, just to reassure you, the work we do is based upon your RDAs and your dentists. This is what they've told us. We're not asking to lower any standards. We're working with your profession, and that helps us with our recommendations. And we appreciate all the feedback. We've taken copious notes that we would use if in that subcommittee work. So thank you.
Can I ask you, Dr. Montez, what are the results for the REB? Because the dental hygiene students take the REB, and so do the dental students, and so that is not considered as a viable option. But for dental hygiene and dentistry, it's...
Excuse me, the question has to come through the chair.
I'm sorry. So I was just wondering for Dr. Montez about the REB exam, because the REB exam is given to dental hygiene and dental students, and the REB actually has a restorative exam, temporary crown, that they do in other states, and one of them, I believe, is Michigan. And the REB comes to our school. Our school doesn't charge them any facility fees, and the students pay directly to REB, and REB does the paperwork and things for that. So I was just wondering, again, if the scope of the subcommittee could be more broad to consider something like a REB exam, because that is a possibility, because we already do it for dental hygiene.
That would fall under the realm of practical examinations administered by an outside agency, and I think that's been addressed in the OPES report. Okay. Yvette, could you call the roll, please?
Yes, I can. The motion is, just in case you forgot, is to eliminate the practical exam and develop a subcommittee to look at alternatives. Calling the roll. Burton? Yes. Chan? Yes. Forsythe? Yes. King?
Yes.
Lai?
No.
Lay? Yes. Medina?
No.
Morrow? Yes. Stewart?
No.
Witcher?
Yes.
Ms. Washington?
Yes.
Rodriguez?
Yes.
Mr. President, the motion passes.
Okay, thank you. I believe that concludes, one more, right, thank you. One more item here. And that is the combined RDA, law and ethics, and written exam.
Just a quick update regarding the combining of the RDA, law and ethics, and general written examination. The board staff has been working diligently with OPES to continue the workshops that are being held. The last workshop was just held this last week. The examination plan is now available on the board's website, and we've posted the link in here. I know that there are some educators and course providers that are interested in getting that information, so that is available on the board's website. The anticipated launch date of the combined exam is May 2018.
Okay, any board member discussion of that item? This is informational only. Any stakeholder comments? Okay, seeing none, public comment for items not on the agenda. Future agenda items. Anyone have any future agenda items they would like to propose for the joint committee to consider?
I have a question on that. It wasn't a task force, it was a subcommittee. Does that, I can't remember, does that get appointed by the chair? Do you?
I believe it would be appointed by the chair.
So would you be able to do that between meetings, or does it have to come back to, okay.
No.
So you
I
get to
can-
move forward in the next 3 months?
I'll be looking for volunteers.
I wasn't offering, I just wanted to understand the steps.
You might get an invitation. Okay, board member and council member comments for items not on the agenda. Seeing none, I think. I'm
Wasn't
sorry.
there something that was requested to be put on the agenda going forward? Didn't someone request something?
Yes, it was for looking at, well, first of all, it was looking at bringing the different schools and the different types of how many students were actually being, not passing the school passage rate. Yeah, so I didn't say that correctly, but I think everybody kind of knows what I was trying to say.
We took note of that during that item, so that will be,
Yeah.
that will be considered.
Okay, with that, I think we can adjourn for lunch. An hour? Oh, recess, I'm sorry.